All right. Welcome. It's good to see people here. Welcome to the Tuesday, July 19th, 2021 regular meeting of the Walnut Creek City Council. The City Council is conducting this meeting from the City Council chamber for the second time since March 2020, and we and staff are complying with the current regulations of the California Department of Public Health and Cal OSHA for safe indoor meetings. We are continuing to allow for remote public comments via Zoom, in addition to in-person comments. We ask that all in-person attendees wear masks per current local recommendations by the County Health Department. This meeting is being held in accordance with the Brown Act as currently in effect under the State Emergencies Act, the Governor's Emergency Declaration related to COVID-19, and the Governor's Executive Order N-2920 issued on March 17, 2020 that allows attendance by members of the City Council, city staff, and the public to participate and conduct the meeting by video conference. Video conference locations are not open to the public. For this meeting, the City Council is participating from the Council Chamber at City Hall, and the Council Chamber is open to the public. All in-person attendees must wear masks. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek City Council meeting or their first teleconferencing meeting, I wanted to welcome everyone and talk briefly about the public comment process. For each agenda item, there will be an opportunity for public comment on the item. Thus, if you desire to speak to an item on the agenda this evening, please hold your comments until the Council considers that item. Additionally, we have a section on the agenda titled Public Communications, which is for public comments on items not on the agenda. Any comments during public communications should not relate to an item that is on the agenda this evening. Consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be initially allocated for public communications for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the open session portion of the meeting if necessary. This process is consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook and will allow for all public comments to be received during the meeting for items not on the agenda. When I open the public comment period, use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, which will alert staff that you have a public comment you would like to provide. We ask that everyone who wishes to speak on an item please use the raised hand feature to state your intent to speak when the item is called. If you're attending in person, please complete a speaker identification card and line up behind the lectern at the appropriate time. Wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, state your name and city of residence for the record. And as a note, I'll be calling on those people first that are here in person. Please keep in mind this is a city business meeting. The City Council has adopted rules of decorum to ensure that meetings are conducted efficiently and effectively, and that all members of the public have a full, fair, and equal opportunity to be heard. All remarks should be addressed to the City Council, and please do not use any profanity during your comments. As the Council is conducting these meetings via video teleconference, and given the COVID-19 pandemic and the increased number of speakers that have wanted to make comments on various issues during our meetings and consistent with city policies related to public comments, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. The Council will accept oral comments. Written comments that have been submitted have been and will be posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not be separately read into the record. To provide a live remote public comment, join the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID is 847-9215-0185, and the passcode is 880389. Should you choose to not provide comments but would like to view the meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways. YouTube Live, you can visit the City of Walnut Creek's YouTube channel. Cable broadcast, Comcast Channel 28 in the incorporated Walnut Creek area only, Rossmore Channel 26, Wave Channel 29, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. And you can live stream it online on the city's website. First, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could please stand up.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Darling?
Here.
Councilmember Haskew?
Here.
Councilmember Silva?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Here.
And Mayor Wilk.
Here. All right, next we have the oath of office for Fran Garland, our newest Park Recreation and Open Space Commissioner. Welcome, Fran, and so we'll first get the oath of office, and then afterwards, please stay up here and say a few words if you'd like.
If you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Frances Garland,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion
or,
for purpose of
for purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. And thank you for your upcoming service.
Thank you. I would like to thank the council for selecting me for the Pros Commission. I'm really very excited. This is an area that I have a lot of experience in as well as a lot of passion. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I also wanted to thank the staff who so far has been very helpful and welcoming to me, helping me come up to speed on the various issues that are before the commission, and just on sort of the how to be a commissioner, like what is the role and what are the sort of guidance for that. So staff's been great. And the first meeting is August 2nd, so I'm ready to go. This is going to be great, and I'm sure I'll be back for joint business with the council. So thank you again.
Terrific, thank you.
This is mine.
And Luella, were you on a commission? You weren't. So 4 of us up here have been on commissions before we were here, so we definitely know the time and involvement and dedication that it takes. So again, thank you, Fran. And then next we have a presentation from the Contra Costa County Fire Protection District.
Hi, good evening. It's Aaron McAllister, Deputy Fire Chief with Contra Costa County Fire.
Good evening, welcome. We can hear you perfectly.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to attempt to screen share. Okay. Can you see that, the beginning of the PowerPoint?
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you. All right, if you're perhaps new to Walnut Creek, Contra Costa County Fire covers multiple cities in Contra Costa County, and Walnut Creek is one of those cities. We serve Walnut Creek through Fire Station 7, Fire Station 1, which has 2 companies, a ladder truck and an engine, downtown Walnut Creek, Station 3 and Rossmore. And I'm happy to lead this evening with a bit of good news, and that we as the fire district have formulated a plan to reopen Station 4 in unincorporated Walnut Creek next fiscal year. And that station will increase our ability to serve not just that unincorporated area, but the community of Walnut Creek as well, as it'll put another resource in the general vicinity and help us with call volume there. So great improvement on the horizon for Walnut Creek. The purpose of this slide is to illustrate some of our fire hazard severity zones in the county. And as you can see by the amount of color that's on this slide, much of our county is covered in one of the fire hazard severity zones, whether it's very high, or even the moderate, where we have a continued threat of wildland fires throughout what is a much longer fire season than has been previously. And we're very much in the throes of fire season right now. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about this evening involves wildland fire and what we're doing to increase our preparedness locally. A couple of things we're concerned about this year. Top of that list is the drought. We can see from the science-based evidence of our fuels and the measurement of the fuel moistures that it is extreme. We're into unprecedented levels of fuel moisture, low or lack thereof, on Diablo and locally, where we're seeing fires grow faster, out of control. The picture on the left is a structure in East County that was started by illegal fireworks and rapidly grew just from a little bit of grass into that structure. And now there are numerous families that were displaced because of the use of illegal fireworks. We have now passed that 4th of July period, but we continue to see incidents involving illegal fireworks in our community where it does remain a threat to incidents. And then resource availability. We're experiencing that today. So there are numerous fires operating throughout the state that are of significant size. And the availability of resources is kind of that scary point for us locally, where there's not a lot of depth left, whether it's state or federal or local, where a lot of resources are deployed. We remain at our status quo day-to-day levels. We do not impact our day-to-day staffing levels to go help out at those fires, but I'm not left with a whole lot of available or surplus personnel should we have significant incidents locally. For example, some of our neighboring counties have strike teams deployed using off-duty personnel. We have our same day-to-day, but there's not a whole lot of depth there if we had significant incidents. In terms of what we're doing for preparedness, weed abatement, both education and enforcement is something that's been in progress for a few months now, and we're definitely at the enforcement phase where if property owners have not taken the necessary steps, we're going to begin the phase where CONFIRE actually sends out a weed abatement contractor and then levies those properties to recover those costs. In essence, we're going to come out and make that situation safer and then recover those costs later down the road. So we do have a program that does that and ultimately issue citations as well if we don't achieve that voluntary compliance. Planning and preparedness does pay off. This was an early season fire, again in the East County, but the point of this picture is to illustrate that structures marked 3 and 6 with the green line that we've drawn around those structures, they were not impacted by this fire. This fire started at the bottom of the screen. It was a wind-driven fire that impacted numerous structures. And structure number 3 and structure 6 had taken steps to help themselves to keep that property clear and free of debris, free of flammable vegetation, whereas structure 4 and structure 5 sustained damage in those yards because there was consumable vegetation or debris in those yards. Some specifics in Walnut Creek. Last calendar year, we experienced 73 exterior fires in Walnut Creek, 10 vegetation fires, and 67 structure fires. So that's a little over 1 structure fire a week, which is pretty steady volume of structure fires. This is in addition to your EMS calls, vehicle accidents, incidents on the highway, and other types of calls. But just speaking of fire, there's some statistics for fires, and it appears that we're on track to be at approximately the same level this calendar year. Some stats from our 4th of July weekend, that definitely kept us busy. 96 total incidents or fires throughout the 4th of July weekend. Fortunately, as you can see on the bottom right, only 6 of those incidents were in Walnut Creek, and many of those fires were caused by fireworks. So you can see from the top right slide, 52 incidents of fire within that 6-hour period. We were definitely very busy, but not quite as busy as we had been in previous years. We did a pretty significant public messaging campaign encouraging folks not to use fireworks. Given the drought, this is definitely not the year that we wanted to see fireworks used in the community. There were a couple of public shows which provided the public and the community an outlet or a place to go. And then lastly, our fire investigation unit conducted some enforcement in terms of undercover operations, seizing and issuing citations and actually arrests for folks who were selling illegal fireworks products. They were pretty successful. They got several hundred pounds of fireworks off the street before the holiday. A couple tools in our toolbox that are relatively new to the county and to Confire. First of all, our helicopter program. Those are the two helicopters, Conair 1 and Conair 2. The helicopter on the left has a bucket capability where it can do firefighting. CAL FIRE has a lot of state responsibility land within the county, and they do respond. But having this initial attack capability of a helicopter with water dropping capability for an immediate response has been a huge asset. This helicopter has been down for annual maintenance, and just today actually went back in service. So just in time for peak fire season to have that capability local. The hand crew program last year was a trial year. Again, very successful, way more successful than we anticipated. It's a crew of about a dozen young persons who are on the hand crew, essentially working in a seasonal capacity during fire season. You get a whole lot of bang for your buck there where they're actually getting our first-in companies back in service much faster following the wildland fire by providing new hose or fresh hose to those engine companies. And then they're handling a lot of kind of the dirty work and the mop up and the cleanup at a wildland fire. Again, allowing those companies back in service faster. That crew program was so successful last year that this year we doubled the size of that crew so that we could achieve 7-day-a-week coverage, and they've been a great asset for us. The Confire dozer program, recently we did purchase a new bulldozer that went in service a couple of years ago. Now that we have two, we have the capability to staff both dozers as we did this last weekend during our red flag fire conditions for anticipated lightning that was supposed to occur on Sunday. Fortunately, that did not materialize, but we were prepared with some additional resources, one of those being the bulldozer to be available last Sunday. Some of the technology we're using that has been newly brought to our county is the alert wildfire camera system. Whether it's personnel in a fire station, administration, on-duty battalion chiefs, or the communications center, we can instantly look at the alert wildfire camera system. Just a few years ago, we only had 1 or 2 cameras that covered just small portions of our county. Now we have about a dozen cameras in the county. Certain individuals have the ability to control those cameras, and really, really quick, we get an idea whether or not we have a big fire or small fire, no fire at all, and we can gauge our response and number of resources accordingly. One of the keys to preparedness is definitely citizen involvement. As a reminder, we do have the Wildfire Preparedness and Evacuation Guide that is available on the Confire website, also on the county CWS website. But there's a lot of tips and information for homeowners to help be prepared in the event they do have to evacuate. In conclusion, I wanted to give you a little bit of sneak peek on some of our efforts to bring technology to evacuation planning. I've seen this product used firsthand on other incidents in other counties last summer when I participated with the CAL FIRE incident management team. Some of the photos on the bottom left are really old school evacuation planning. You can see paper maps, one of them hung on the side of a fire pickup or a fire SUV, and a bunch of chiefs standing around. They're actually drawing a box. We're going to close and evacuate this street to this street, and north of and south of. We're going to take that the next level and incorporate technology that really pre-designates our evacuation zones based on some proprietary technology that Zone Haven, who the vendor is, has developed. to really minimize the number of control points, minimize the effort required to conduct that evacuation. And it brings common operating picture to CWS, law enforcement, and fire so that we know exactly what that box is, what geographic area is being given an evacuation warning or an evacuation order. We're working currently with all of our law enforcement partners, including Walnut Creek Police Department, to review the preliminary zones and then provide that final approval so that we can put this software into service and have that capability as soon as this fire season. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chief McAllister. Do you have any questions from council members? Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Thank you, Deputy Chief, for the update and all the hard work the fire district is doing to keep us all safe. You had mentioned Station 4 would be back in service this next fiscal year. Can you remind us where that station is located?
Station 4 is at 700 Hawthorne in unincorporated Walnut Creek, in southern unincorporated Walnut Creek.
And did you say that would be that would be the 2022-2023 fiscal year, which would be the next fiscal year, not the one we just started?
That's correct. We need a little bit of time to rehabilitate the station and hire staff. The staff's got to go through an academy. So that's all part of our planning process.
All right, thank you. Good news.
And I just have one, oh, Councilmember Darling?
Just a real quick question. When you're talking about defensible space, I know in other areas, we have property up in Plumas County, and there's a fire safe council that's now working with landowners, cost sharing beyond the 100-foot defensible space to do additional clearing. Is there anything like that in Contra Costa County right now, or?
We have initiated some of our first Firewise communities and some adjacent communities to Walnut Creek, and we're definitely looking forward to bringing more. Those are really grassroots efforts that if a group of homeowners or a neighborhood association wants to initiate that in their community, we're going to partner with them to make that happen. So we're certainly open to more projects like that.
Okay, thank you.
I have just a quick question. A lot of people from Rossmore watch this, and I was there just giving them some updates a month ago, and the questions always come up of how, as the Contra Costa Fire working with Rossmore to ensure that should a disaster happen, they're able to be evacuated okay. Could you just give a quick update on how you work directly with Rossmore to ensure that safety for everyone is one of the top priorities?
Certainly. You know, in a lot of ways, Rossmore was ahead of the curve. We participated to a very high level with Rossmore in the development of their new emergency plan. A component of that plan was to really zone off Rossmore so that if there was to be a really bad day where you had to evacuate portions or all of Rossmore, Rossmore was zoned earlier than the project that I just spoke of, which is the Zone Haven project, where we're going to zone the whole county and pre-identify these zones. So in many ways, Rossmore led the effort in that. We participated in that with Rossmore. Those zones are identified in our mapping software so that I can look at the mobile data terminal in my vehicle at any given time as with any other fire response vehicle. We know those zones if we had to evacuate them. We're in constant contact with their public safety manager there. And then Engine 3 spends a lot of time in the Rossmore community. So there's a high level of familiarity there.
Great, thank you. Do you happen to know who the public safety manager is?
I do. I would botch that name if I had to say it right off the top of my head, but I know there's been a change there.
Okay.
And we're familiar.
It's our former Captain
Yes,
Tom
it's
Cashin.
former Captain Tom Cashin.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Great. Thank you very much. Doesn't look like we have any more other questions. So appreciate your being on with us and giving us an update.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. And before I call for a motion on the consent calendar, the Brown Act requires the City Council to provide a brief oral announcement regarding any proposed changes to executive compensation prior to taking final action. Accordingly, I want to announce the following consent calendar item 2C, prospectively restores a 3% salary increase that the city manager previously forewent during fiscal year 2020 to 2021, and increases the city manager's annual salary by 2.5%, both effective July 25th, 2021. Item 2C also provides for a future 3% annual salary increase as of July 1st, 2022, subject to a satisfactory performance evaluation, and implements other modifications to the city manager's deferred compensation. Consent calendar item 2D prospectively increases the hourly rates for city attorney services paid to Myers-Nave by approximately 4% effective July 25th, 2021. Item 2D also provides for a future 4% rate increase as of July 1st, 2022, subject to a satisfactory performance review, and establishes 2 new rate categories for attorneys providing services to the city. And consent calendar item 2E prospectively restores a 3% salary increase that the city's department directors previously forewent during fiscal year 2020 to 2021, effective July 25th, 2021. And I, in addition, just quickly want to mention that on item 2K, as it relates to the consent calendar, we will be deferring the proposed action on the deemed approved extension as additional research is needed. This portion of item 2K will return to the council at a later date. The council is still being asked to extend the rebound program to December 31st, and therefore consent calendar item 2K will remain on the agenda for council action. Now, does any council member wish to pull any item for discussion?
Yes. I would like to pull items 2F and 2J, please.
All right, any other items to be pulled? 2F and 2J? And I will actually pull item 2K, just to speak to it. I don't have any questions. All right, do we have a motion on the remaining item? Or, I'm sorry, public comments. And if any member of the public wish to comment on an item on the consent calendar, please use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, if you'd like to provide a public comment. For those who desire to provide public comment on a consent calendar item, please raise your hand now. Or if you're in here, just come and step up. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been and will be posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record but will not be separately read into the record. At this time, I'll ask the city clerk if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comments. And if you're here in the room, please start forming a line. And if they're on Zoom, I guess we'll bring them in.
Okay, we have Pete Bennett.
Sorry, pushed the wrong button. You know, I was a former resident of Walnut Creek. You remember me? I know you do. Painfully for some of you. So as you pass around the raises and accolades, understand my frustration with the process. If you look behind the wall, right where you're sitting, Kevin and Luella, I slept out there for 6 months, only to have all my property stolen. Everything. And then that cascaded into failures up and down the ladder. That is the ladder of the police department and the agencies. Consistent with the stonewalling and the complete disregard for my safety and my life. Now, it was nice of them to take a discount, but you never once asked me what kind of impact this has had. I'll read off some of the impact that spans 40 years. Blazing Burgers burned down, Johnny Love's, Dental Lab, Walnut Creek, Wells Fargo, Wendy's, North Main, Lava Raj, Piedmont Lumber, Locust Street, Richmond Safeway, Paradise Fire, PG&E San Bruno, Malahongo, Walnut Creek, Mike 7 on Danville. I know 4 people killed in the ghost ship fire. Myers Nave, I don't even think you should have them working there, because I was told to go see the city council or call the Contra Costa Bar Association. Well, I tried to do that around the same time Mark Kuhn jumped from the city parking garage, who was actually one of the few attorneys that actually tried to help. Thank you for your service. I'm not sure if I'm happy about it, but you are too. And everything I'm saying has a lot of validity, it really does. Unbelievable terrorism directed at me by some of your officers.
Next speaker on Zoom is David Rangel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Hey, is this general, I can speak about general things or?
No, this is
Okay,
regarding the
got it.
consent calendar.
Oh, gotcha, because I saw Pete Bennett and I logged in late. My bad, I'll log off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I don't see any additional hands raised.
All right, we'll close the public or the comment for the consent calendar and then bring it back to council if we have a motion on any of the consent calendar items that have not been pulled.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, on the consent calendar, I just wanted to confirm that on item M, that lease
amended.
is as revised on the dais and posted on the agenda this afternoon.
Yes. Thank you, Brian. Who's making this motion?
I am.
Okay.
I am. Okay, so let's go. I move to approve consent calendar items A through E, G through I, L through M as amended, and N and O.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Susie, could you please call roll?
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois,
Aye.
and Mayor Wilk.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. All right, first, Councilmember Silva, we'll move over to you for the
Thank you
ones
very
pulled.
much. Item 2F, which I pulled, is the adoption of a resolution that is approving a memorandum of understanding between the city and our civilian police unit. And I want to thank the members of that unit, which includes our police dispatchers, for working with us on this new contract, which will be encompassing for 3 years. And I also want to thank all of you for your work on behalf of the community and your work with our police department to make our community safe. And I'm happy to move the item.
I'll second. Susie, if we could have a roll call?
Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Mayor Wilk,
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
And you pulled another one?
I did. I pulled item 2J, which is related to the Shadelands Multimodal Improvement Plan. I have some questions for staff that I discussed this afternoon. I don't know, Steve Waymeyer, if you're going to do it or if Smadar is going to zoom in to answer the questions, but. The item in question is a comprehensive multimodal plan for the Shadelands Business Park that was done in tandem with the Property Business Improvement District of the Shadelands business owners and was developed with a grant from the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. So, and it's very comprehensive, and I'm very impressed with it, but I have a couple of questions. The first is the letter of support from the President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce references the assessment, the funds in the assessment district that are available potentially to be used. Can you tell us how many dollars are in that account and what they can be used for?
Sure, and for the record, my name is Steve Waymeyer. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director and City Engineer. Those funds were used to initially build a roadway system that's out there. And there's about a little over $2 million that's available in there. And those funds can only be used to maintain what was actually built under those set of plans. And so that was been brought to the council several years ago, and it's something that's been set up for us for now. So we can use those for maintenance work only.
So that would mean repaving of the 6 or 7 internal roadways that are in the business park?
That's correct.
But does that also mean that as we do that work, we could do restriping, crosswalks, et cetera, at the same time and effectively get it done more efficiently?
Sure, we've checked with the city attorney's office, and striping is something that we could do because that would be part of the normal maintenance. But doing extra sidewalk work or doing the crosswalk bulb outs like might be shown on there, not that, but just the striping of them could be.
So painting new crosswalks, but not the bulb outs, not any concrete work.
That's correct.
We're talking asphalt and striping work.
That's correct.
So my next question has, toward the end of the plan, it references a potential pilot project, which would be low cost, of course, nothing's free, and near term, and it's mostly on Mitchell Drive, or is it Wiggett? Maybe it's Wiggett. Could you roughly estimate what the costs of that would be? There was some crosswalks, some striping.
I don't have a cost exactly for what that is, but it'd be minimal. I would say less than $50,000. One thing that we have been doing are called pop-up type projects, where we temporarily put things up and see how they operate with the traffic, and we can adjust them as we go, and then we'll come in and put them in more permanently. And that's something we'd like to do out there. It's been successful. It's something that our boardman has brought on board with us, and we've used it several times with a lot of success.
One of the questions I asked Madar earlier today was, if you read through the plan, what you see is a list of tools or tactics, striping of crosswalks, separated bike paths, and then street by street, segment by segment, it talks about what should happen in those segments. And I asked her the question, well, what's the best way to do this? Street by street, or is it tactic by tactic? You want a quiz? What did she tell me?
You know, it probably depends on what we're trying to do. If we're going to do a striping project, we would do it street by street is what we would do. When we're doing an overlay or a slurry sill, we would try and stripe it with what they're having there. But some of the more sidewalk pieces, we would like to work those in with development as they came along and as funding became available.
So we will be keeping an eye on all of these potentially as development happens in the Shadelands Business Park, or as we are coming up on our capital programs in that area.
Definitely. As a matter of fact, as part of the recently approved capital budget, there is funds set aside for the city to build their sidewalk portion at the corner of Wiggett and Shadelands. I think it's Shadelands, where we own the property there, where the Shadelands Art School is, and also where the garden center is.
And my last question is actually one we did have an opportunity to talk about earlier in the day, which is the Transportation Commission, after reviewing the plan maybe 18 months ago, wanted to ensure that the bike lanes were separated, not integrated into the pedestrian paths. And in doing so, which I think is a great idea, it indicates that we have a way to separate those bike lanes, put them in the street, and still maintain the 40-foot wide right-of-way. But the other additional recommendation is that the sidewalks, wherever we can, become 10-foot wide. Of course, that's, up on the curb. Do we have that land? To what extent are the missing gaps or widths not in our control and are on private property?
The right-of-way width is 64 feet, so if we're able to put it in adjacent to the existing curb and gutter, it would stay right within our property. But if we had to deviate that for any reason, for trees or whatever options we had, then we would want to look at either changing the street width or working with the adjacent property owner on using their property to make it happen. So it's something that we would have to adjust as we went along.
But by and large, we have the width available within our right-of-way to expand the sidewalk widths where we could to 10 feet.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Those were my questions. And I am happy to move the item.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Susie, read the
Coun-
roll.
Yep. Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois,
Aye.
Mayor Wilk.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And I pulled item 2K, which is the motion extending the rebound program through December 31st, 2021. And I just wanted a couple of things here. First of all, big thanks to staff, to Terry, to Janine, Colette, and I know Casava's been part of that up until this point. And you've done just so much work in working with the restaurants and the retail downtown to get us to this point where we're able to talk more intelligently about what's needed downtown. And of course, we're still to discuss this in the months ahead. But seeing the recent survey that came out showing 82% of respondents out of about over 1,400 respondents definitely wanted to keep outdoor dining, and 10% said maybe. It's thoroughly obvious to this council that people like this. And so I appreciate the fact that we're able to help restaurants recover from the pandemic and just this, the disastrous economic collapse that happened last year, and help them a little bit further, and then continue the discussion for what would happen in 2022 in the months ahead. So again, appreciate that, and I hope the restaurants and retail and everybody that comes to Walnut Creek appreciates this as well. And with that, I'll make the motion to pass this.
Second.
Mayor Wilk,
Aye.
Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, just for the record, if I could just state for the public that approval of the motion does not include adoption of the attached resolution.
Correct, yes. Thank you, Brian. So there is still, as mentioned earlier, that we will not be, this does not include that resolution. So this was just for the extension at this point. We'll bring that resolution back at a future meeting. All right, next on the agenda is public communications. And this portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the council cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. Consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be allocated at this time for public communications for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the meeting if necessary. Does any member of the public wish to provide public comments at this time? Please begin to stand in line. Okay, we'll get you. You're perfect. Stand right there. Thank you. All right. Anybody else, just line up along the wall there. And over Zoom, please raise your hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only. If you'd like to provide a public comment, this is the time to do so. For those who desire to provide public comments on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand now so that we can identify the total number of speakers that desire to speak at this time. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not be separately read into the record. At this time, I will note that the time is 6:44, and we will take public comments on items not on the agenda until approximately 7:14, and then the remainder of any such comments at the end of the open session portion of the meeting. So we'll start with anybody that's in person, and I'll ask you to step up to the lectern and give your name and city of residence.
Thank you. My name is Cara Navolio. I live in Walnut Creek, and I have been hired by Walnut Creek Downtown as the program coordinator for Arts Around August, which is a month-long celebration that the city is sponsoring along with 11 different arts organizations and community organizations. And so I'm just here to let everybody know that this is happening, and we encourage everybody to come downtown during the month of August and participate in all of the great events that are going on. I'm just going to list a few of them. We have summer concerts, Broadway Plaza, movies on the roof of the Lesher Center. The first Wednesday Street Fest is coming back. We have some new events like Family Chalk Art Days, a movable feast, which is a culinary experience where you would go to 3 restaurants and get a little bit of art, public art information along the way. We have history tours, we have public art tours, we have Cinderella being performed on the Lesher Plaza, and we have the Lesher Center is open with performances inside again. We have opera coming, and jazz concerts, and youth performances, and of course the Bedford Gallery has their exhibit going on, the Art of Recology, and just all kinds of things. Every single day we have something fun to do. There's a new scavenger hunt as well, forgot to mention that. And Paint the Downtown, which is going to be a real fun art festival where artists are going to paint in plein air around the city, and then there'll be a big celebration at the end of August and an awards ceremony. So I hope everyone comes and participates. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. This,
Can I ask
can't
a
wait. This is
question?
terrific. We have a question.
So how would I find the calendar of events and whether it's ticketed or free?
Okay, great question. So at the Walnut Creek Downtown website, we have a page. It's called Arts Around August, and it has links to all of the different events and a calendar, and you will find out which, by going to those different websites, you can find out what's free, what times they're taking place, what days they're taking place, and all the kind of details that you would need.
Thank you.
Do we know what's the website address, just so that for people to know?
It's walnutcreekdowntown.com/artsaroundaugust.
Great. Thank you so much. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that are in the chambers that are wishing to talk now during public comment? I don't see any. So do we have anybody online?
We have about 7 speakers online, so we'll
Okay.
go ahead and start with Catherine Wally.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Good evening, Council. This is Catherine Wally, resident of Walnut Creek, pronouns she, her. On May 6th, the New England Journal of Medicine published an article containing insights bearing directly on the development of a non-police crisis response program in our county. In the article, Decoupling Crisis Response from Policing, a Step Towards Equitable Psychiatric Emergency Services, the authors, 3 psychiatrists of color, lay out the case not only for developing the infrastructure for non-police responses to psychiatric crises, but also the necessity of developing sustainable funding mechanisms. The authors state, "We believe that unarmed clinicians must lead crisis response teams, since no amount of training for police in de-escalation and bias can reverse a history of racism. Moreover, involving lethally armed agents in all psychiatric emergencies criminalizes crisis encounters and deviates from the clinical standard of care. Shifting the obligation of mental health emergency responses from law enforcement to clinical teams would advance parity and outcomes for all patients, and particularly for Black patients. Assigning this responsibility to clinical teams aligns with standards set by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which recommends that crisis models use licensed clinicians dispatched by a call center capable of triggering acuteness and severity with a focus on linkage to treatment." The article continues, stating that elected officials, regulatory agencies, professional medical societies, mental health specialty organizations, and community advocates must collaborate to develop the funding mechanisms and infrastructure necessary for a viable and integrated mental health emergency response system. As our county, here in Contra Costa County, has some funding sources in the form of voluntary contributions by municipalities, alongside potential Measure X funds, I'm reminded that we cannot lose sight of the critical need to also advocate for the development of sustainable funding mechanisms, just as we would for any other healthcare need. Mental health care is healthcare. I look forward to continuing to learn and collaborate with the City of Walnut Creek, as well as other stakeholders in service of this aim. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Next speaker is David Rangel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, David.
Great, thank you. Hello, Council. David Rangel, Walnut Creek resident and retired Walnut Creek PD Sergeant. This month, the city showcased a video entitled Come Downtown. The video, although a good representation of our beautiful city's buildings, restaurants, and cultural events, it was lacking on showing the diversity of our residents and visitors. This month, the PD also introduced a recruitment post showing a young female person of color as a future police officer candidate. Well, let's make it happen, Council, since the PD has currently 0 Black female officers. To remind our residents, the PD has never had a Black lieutenant, captain, or chief of police. In fact, in over 100 years, the PD has never had a person of color serve as captain or chief of police. The city is in the process of implementing a task force entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Hopefully, all of this is just not smoke and mirrors on your part. Congratulations to Chief Jamie Knox as the new chief of police. I sincerely hope that he dismantles the good old boys network that has hindered the PD from truly being a remarkable police department. It's time for merit, work ethic, and community involvement to supersede who you know and who your friends are in order to get promoted. The residents of this city deserve professional, qualified, competent, proactive, and community-oriented police officers and supervisors. Thank you for your time, Council.
Next speaker is Kristen Lomasny.
Sorry about that. First, I'd like to thank the council for this opportunity to speak. I'm Kristen Lomasny of Walnut Creek, and I wanted to address the speaker project development proposed for Seven Hills Ranch. And I know the property is under county jurisdiction, but I also know its main entrance and exit hinges on the city's sale of the Kinross extension. But I'm also realizing that Walnut Creek residents and Heather Farm Park visitors will be hugely impacted by this oversized development, so it's become a city matter as well. So EB Mud declared a stage 1 drought back in April, asked East Bay residents to reduce water consumption by 10%. And my husband and I are diligent about water conservation, low flush toilets, drought resistant plants. We let what little grass we have die, and we take shorter and shorter showers. As for power, I'm sure you all, like us, receive flex alerts warning us to conserve power, particularly between 4 and 9. With temps regularly over 95, when we turn our air off at 4 and turn on our fans, we're soon sitting at 81 degrees downstairs and 90 upstairs. Look how red my face is, it's hot. So I'm just wondering how we can accommodate the residents of all the huge developments planned in the area when the system can't seem to serve all the existing residents. And was wondering if there was a plan as summers become more and more uncomfortable in Walnut Creek. It's just something on my mind as my husband and I give up certain comforts out of the responsibility we feel to our community. But also, you know, Seven Hills Ranch is 30 acres of unmolested land. Heather Farm Park and the open spaces are crammed with people trying to spend time outdoors. I'm just wondering if we could please, for the sake of the environment and our own sanity, please consider not building over every inch of land we have left when there are already partially developed plots like Shadelands that can be built on first if deemed necessary. The speaker development would cut down 4 times the trees of Oakmont Senior Living. I just ask the City Council please have the long-term welfare of its residents in mind and use their influence to protect our best interest as speaker development progresses. Thank you.
Next speaker is Pete Bennett.
Got it right this time. Hey, Dave Rangel is absolutely right. In fact, you know, on my blog called deadwitness.com, I have dug up information about hate crimes in this county going back 40 plus years. I moved here in 78 to Geary Road. And there's a sketchy deal why we lost the property, family. And the same thing applies to another building downtown Walnut Creek. I'll leave the names out. But I used to sing at the gay bar a lot. Nice people over there, friendly. One of them got thrown off the BART structure. okay? Then I hired a black man in 1982, and he was shot dead by Pittsburgh police. And then I moved to Santa Monica Drive in 79, and they burned a black man alive next to my house. And then in 1986, my customers, the Ringheims, Asian. Kiko was a beautiful person. Double homicide, unsolved. Then in 1988, my gay friend at Safeway, that was the manager and also my point of contact for my work at Safeway, she was killed by Officer Bergen doing life in prison. And then in 1997, Jason Amon Watts was sitting in the Ace Hardware store location in 1997, and he was shot dead allegedly stealing some kind of credit card. Except he worked at Nordstrom's with my ex-wife, whose co-worker Marie Kuhn was found dead in Southern California. It's been going on for a long time, okay? And I've taken the brunt of this with beatings, muggings, and false arrest. Things are just a little bit different now, just a little bit. Where are my police reports?
Next speaker is Rosalie Howarth.
Hi, it's Rosalie Howarth. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello, council and staff. I want to ask you to please look long and hard at this Seven Hills Ranch proposal, this Diablo Glen thing. I agree that it is a monstrosity. It's 30 acres, almost completely covered with buildings and hardscape, retaining walls up to 26 feet in height, mammoth buildings covering 30 football fields, 400 trees cut down, all next to Heather Farm Park. You would never approve this project for Walnut Creek ever. Now, as you heard, it is county land, as we know, but it's surrounded by Walnut Creek on all four sides, so our citizens will suffer the effects. And of course, the entrance is on city land, and it's the tiny little Kinross stub. It empties onto Marchbanks, which is a 2-lane road. Now, there's a 600 space parking garage for this commercial enterprise. And let's be clear, this is not housing for families or workers. This is a commercial facility serving a very narrow segment of the population. Besides the residents, there's tons of workers, medical, clerical, homemaids, pool maintenance, recreational, janitorial, and deliveries all day in and out. And it's a half-hour walk to either BART station in the dark on the canal trail in the winter. So those people will drive. So that's a minimum of 1,200 car trips a day. This is not a done deal. The developer has to get an amendment to the county general plan. So I am asking you, talk to your counterparts at county, ask them to deny that amendment, and please do not sell that entrance land to the developer until this is all straightened out. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Next speaker is user BG.
She brought in? Okay. If you can hear us, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hit the unmute. Sorry. My name is Barbara Guinness, and I've been a resident of Walnut Creek since 1996. Last Friday, I went for a jog over in the area of Lime Ridge and Paradise Valley trails. And these trails are designated as hiker or horse-only trails. So it was really interesting to me to see that for my visit, I only saw bike riders and no hikers or horses on these specific trails, except for me. Going up the Lime Ridge Trail is a snaky small trail. I encountered a couple bikes, but I was able to get to the side and we passed safely. However, on the way down on the other side, the Paradise Valley side, I got to a narrow section of that trail when I heard a slight ringing sound behind me. And then about a second or so later, I heard a sliding braking of a bicycle behind me or something. Anyway, I moved to the side of the trail and turned around, and then a bicycle rider streamed past me, kind of muttered something like, "I have a bell on my bike." So after that happened, I just went my way down the rest of the Paradise Valley Trail. But I noticed in a short period of time, that same biker was coming up the trail, and I recognized him. So I asked him if his bell on his bike meant I was supposed to jump off the trail or get off the trail for him. So he cordially answered back, "Shut up," plus added some other friendly words. I really enjoy these trails. They're shady and they're twisty, and in the spring there used to be a lot of flowers there. I've attached a copy, I'm not sure if I sent it in soon enough, but of a no bicycle sign that I've seen in Shell Ridge. It says "no bicycles" really large, and I suggested to one of the rangers that maybe we ought to place this on these trails in the Lime Ridge area. So hopefully you'll consider that, and it just makes me nervous to think that the open space staff is considering even more trails with bumps and curves and things when they can't.
Thank you.
And I believe the last speaker is Jim Frey.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. And thank you for the time this evening. My name is Jim Frey. I live in Heather Farms neighborhood here in Walnut Creek. I am a member of the Save Seven Hills Ranch organization. And while, as you've already heard this evening, the Seven Hills Ranch is under county jurisdiction, I am asking as well that communication be had with the county supervisors regarding this development. I'm just going to add a couple of other points to it, to what you've already heard this evening. First, the development plan does go against the general plan, which at the time it was accepted had received a full vetting and agreement. And that plan does not prohibit a development. In fact, the plan allows for a development that would work with the city of Walnut Creek's goals of retaining open space and development that would limit environmental impact. The speaker development plan would require the removal of the 400 trees already mentioned. The trees include a lot of old oaks. The development plan requires the leveling of 3 hills and the removal of 17,000 dump truck loads of dirt from the area to create the level site. It is a 3 to 4 year construction project. As already mentioned, very tall retaining walls, fully absorbing all of the open space. Lastly, I will just sort of make also a second note on the traffic. It will feed onto Marshbanks Road, then onto Ignacio Valley Road. It's expected to add an additional 1,100 cars and trucks to the Ignacio traffic, which you know is very difficult already. So on behalf of the Save Seven Hills Ranch organization, we're asking that the council raise the concerns of our community, to press the county supervisors to whatever extent possible to retain the general plan as written and accepted and without this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, there are no additional speakers.
All right, thank you. So we'll close public comment for the evening. And let me ask, first of all, members of the council, if you have any questions of staff related to any of the public comments or any comments to make yourself based upon some of the comments that we heard. No? All right, then we'll bring it to the next agenda item, which is council member and staff announcements, reports on activities or requests. Closed session announcements.
Thank you, Mayor. There were no announcements and no reportable action in tonight's closed session.
Thank you. City manager reports.
Yes, good evening. Dan Buckshire, city manager, and I do have 3 updates this evening. Wanted to provide an update on COVID-19. A couple actions have taken place, and want to provide an update on vaccine status. So On Friday, the county health officer, in conjunction with several other Bay Area county health officers, issued a recommendation that masks be worn by all, not just those that are vaccinated, because there is an increase in COVID cases almost exclusively to those who are unvaccinated. And so really the rationale for having everyone wear masks is that it's too difficult to tell who is vaccinated and who's not just walking down the street. So if everybody's wearing a mask, it will help provide further protection. So we're in the midst of implementing that here in the city. Obviously, this evening, we're all wearing masks here just to try to support that recommendation, noting that it is not an order or a mandate. And I do want to provide a statistic that really jumps out at me. It was in the news over the weekend. So for California, of all of the COVID cases, 99.93% of all COVID cases are those who are unvaccinated. So it's very telling how effective the vaccine is, and I cannot underscore enough, those who have not gotten vaccinated, go get vaccinated. It works. You'll help protect yourself, your family, your friends, your coworkers, and in our case at the city, those we serve in the public. Absolutely imperative.
Dan, a quick question on that. You'd mentioned walking down the street. Is that recommendation for indoors or for everywhere?
It is for indoors, so it's really, when folks are indoors, I should have said walking through the halls or something along those lines. That's a good clarification. So that is where things stand. Obviously, the health officers are watching the numbers closely as things are ticking up here with the Delta variant taking hold. Second thing I wanted to note is for those that did not see the press release last Wednesday, we do have Jamie Knox as our new Chief of Police, who will be joining us on Monday. And very pleased to welcome him. Jamie was until last week a captain in San Leandro, previously served as captain in the city of Novato, and spent a long time in the Rockland area as well. We had a very thorough process lasting several months. We held multiple community meetings, received hundreds of responses verbally, in addition to hundreds of responses written on the characteristics that folks in the community would like to see in a chief. We synthesized that information and then looked for a chief that met those guidelines. The process was very thorough, many rounds of interviews involving several members of our PD, our city staff, chiefs from other organizations, and several community members to help vet our police chief, and Jamie Knox was a clear #1 choice. So look forward to welcoming him. We will be announcing before too long. We'll work through the details when we'll have a community meet and greet where folks from the community can come have a chance to meet our new chief. And then third, not on nearly a positive note, I would like to ask our acting police chief and Captain Tracy Reese to provide an update on the shooting that occurred on early Saturday morning. And I believe she's on Zoom if we can pull her in.
While we're waiting for Tracy, we look forward to welcoming J.B. Knox here at the next council meeting as well. Is Tracy on? Go ahead, Tracy, if you can.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, I'm having some video difficulties, but while I work on that, I'll go ahead and provide you with that update. So good evening, Mayor Wilk, members of council. My name is Tracy Reese, and I'm a captain with the police department, and I'm happy to provide you with an update this evening on this ongoing investigation. So as you know, this past Sunday, shortly after 1:30 in the morning, our Walnut Creek Police Department received multiple 911 calls reporting shot fired in North Main Street. For perspective, that's in a business industrial area north of downtown. Officers arrived on scene within 2 minutes of being dispatched and found 4 people who were suffering from gunshot wounds. Our officers performed life-saving measures until paramedics arrived on scene. Our investigators have since determined the shooting stemmed from an argument between several people which resulted in 4 people being shot during an exchange of gunfire. Tragically, one of them was pronounced dead at the scene, and the other 3 were transported to local hospitals for their injuries. None of the others had life-threatening injuries. The police department currently, we're utilizing all available resources to actively investigate this case. Not only were there multiple people involved, there were also a number of witnesses in and around the area that we needed to speak with. We are currently following up on multiple leads that we expect will help us to resolve this case. As we learn more, I'll be happy to share updates with your council and the public.
Thank you, Captain Reese. Do we have any questions? No? All right, we look forward to the update. I'm sure we all look forward to the update. Thank you. All right, next we have City Council member reports on AB 1234 activities, council member assignments, and various activities and upcoming events. Shall we start to the left with Councilmember Darling?
I'll start. Couple things. The homeless task force had a meeting, I think it was last week, and we had a great presentation from the city staff about the clean water program. As we know, many of the homeless are camping down in along the waterways, and that can create conflicts because they don't have proper sanitation. And so the city staff is working with the local regional water quality control board on ways to improve the situation and deal with clean water requirements. And they've done a great job. They presented many of the things they have been doing, like providing portable toilets, things like that. So that was a good presentation. We also had a really thorough update from the county on the mental health response. And I continue to be really impressed with the work that they're doing, the amount of detail that they're taking as they plan out the launch of the program. I also had a good opportunity to corner one of our Board of Supervisor representatives, and they assured me that that is something that they're looking at very seriously for Measure X funding. So that was really good to hear. The next is I got to figure out how to be a city council person at the farmer's market, thanks to Council Members Silva and Mayor Pro Tem Francois. I got to get out there. So if you're at the downtown farmer's market between 10 and 12, one of us will be there, and I'll be there soon all by myself, and you could come and play Stump the Council Member and ask questions. I look forward to that. The last thing is Marin Clean Energy. The board meeting last week, we talked about a couple things that affect us here in Walnut Creek. One is MCE continues to reach out to people who are not having, or who are unable to cover their energy bills. They've also gotten additional money from the state. There's about $1 billion statewide. So if somebody's having trouble with their energy bill, contact MCE. They can help sign you up for a program and get a repayment program. They did mention there's a similar state fund on the water side. So both energy and water, there's been moratoriums on cutoffs. Those moratoriums are going to come to the end of the near future, but they're ready and willing to work with people. The other good note that they had was at the end of the fiscal year, there was enough money so that we could put an additional $4.5 million into their operating reserve fund. Last year, they put 10.5 in there, so they have a very healthy operating reserve. I know we've talked at past meetings about some of the other community choice aggregators running into financial trouble with the hot weather last August and the prices of energy during that. And MCE continues to take the appropriate measures to make sure that they have the reserves and to make sure they also have done this tremendous financial thing that saves them $3 million a year that I would love to say as a board member I truly understand. But they are working on the financial details, and so I'm feeling confident in their ability to go through this summer with a similar fiscal conservativeness that I appreciate.
Thank you. Shall we just keep on going around here?
I just figured you were right. Okay, so it has been a long time since we've met, and so there were lots of transportation meetings in my life, 2 CCTA regular ones, and then I covered for somebody for the Planning Commission, and I actually am not going to bore you with all the details. I am going to talk about the presentation that was done at Transpac and about Contra Costa Transportation's Authority's relationship with the Gomentum development and exploratory experimental thing in Concord. And I am hoping that at some time in the near future, we can convince Tim Hale, who's the executive director, to come and show us all the amazing things that they're doing out there. One of the favorite projects that I'm aware of is trying to get first and last mile for Rossmore residents as a cutting edge autonomous vehicle situation. The only other non-transportation thing that I had anything to do with was attending the ABAG meeting, where everybody pretty much bitched and moaned about their RENA allocations, and we voted on the budget and gratefully got a meeting of less than 3 hours. So I consider that a success on every level.
Thank you. Councilmember Askew. That's Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Thank you, Mayor. I had relative light duty since our last meeting in June, but that's about to change in the next week or two. So I will have a more robust update on August 3rd. But in the meantime, I did, as Councilmember Darling stated, did attend the farmers market this last Sunday, as my colleagues are also serving, and it was great to see good attendance there. Nice to be back at the booth and talking to people about what's happening in Walnut Creek. There was a question a constituent asked at the market about handicapped parking, and I spoke to the manager of the market, who assured me that there is handicapped parking available on Sundays on LaCassie, and it turns out that it's 4 spaces in total. So you just need to look for the parking meters that are shielded for handicapped parking, but that's made available every Sunday for the farmers market. And then on a fun note, the mayor was out of town, so I had to take really heavy duty and judge cocktails, the signature cocktail for Walnut Creek, which is called the Calipolitan. And there was some pretty heavy competition among 7 local restaurants and bars. The winning drink was designed by Giuseppe Alagna of Benvenuti, and I'll quote him, who says, "This cocktail's inspiration comes from the beauty of California, from the northern redwood forest to the southern farmlands to all the wine in between. All of California coming together to make the Calipolitan." So all of our local restaurants and bars will be, you can partake in this drink at any of them during this next year, and it's the Calipolitan, and congratulations to Giuseppe and Benvenuti. That is my report.
Thank you. And do I understand that you had to drink 7 drinks to come with the winner?
Yes, actually.
How was that?
It was, I was a little bit lightheaded when I left, the event.
That was a tough duty. I'm sorry I missed it. Councilmember Silva.
But he wasn't staggering. And I will announce that Giuseppe is a Las Lomas High School graduate. So anyway, it was a fun evening. So let's see, with the Mayor Pro Tem, I am a representative from the city of Walnut Creek. The 2 of us are on the board of Recycle Smart, which is the trash and recycling collector. And it is 5 cities and part of the county that come together on that. And this week we are going to start the conversation about the next franchise agreement. We are about 6 years into the current one. It's a 10-year agreement, and it takes time to define the contract terms and then negotiate an agreement. I am also, on behalf of the council, the liaison both to the Chamber of Commerce and to the Visitors and Convention Bureau. I'll start with the Visitors and Convention Bureau. They are reporting that occupancy rates are rising, which is good news. And they continue to rise as we break out of the COVID challenges. So I will reiterate what our city manager said, which is the more we get vaccinated, the faster businesses can get back to business and our community can get back to normal. The Chamber of Commerce is continuing their Back to Business forums, which is really part of the Civic Affairs Forum. And I have convinced them that a representative from the City Council should help them with those. If they want to talk about civic affairs issues, who but a member of our City Council would be able to offer input on that. And so if you ever, I think I've got that permanently assigned, so not to myself, but more to the liaison from Council. Another reason to want to be involved with the Chamber. The ice rink will be back in this winter. And this year, for the first time, there will be some ice hockey. So in case you're an ice hockey player, I know former member Gary Skrell is all over that already. Councilmember Darling and I serve on an ad hoc committee related to Toyota Walnut Creek and their proposed plans, and we continue to talk to them about a development agreement and community benefits, and we will find out shortly in a few weeks if they like what we asked for. Probably not, but it'll be an interesting conversation. The Mayor, I'll let you talk about the rebound committee and what we talked about recently. And the board of the League of California Cities met for the first time in person last week. We'd been doing all of our meetings for the last year through the virtual environment. And two items of note. One is we have been spending the last 7 months doing a study of governance within the League of California Cities. And that's how we work together across the state, the 482 cities, to govern the organization that we have. Our objective in that process was really to talk about ensuring that there are multiple pathways to leadership within the organization, as well as being able to balance the need for experience on a board or a policy committee with new people with new ideas. The most significant, we took action on a number of items, but the most significant of which is that a bylaws change will be coming to the general membership at the annual conference. And so when we pick our delegate, you will be voting on this. And it's a proposal to add 5 new seats to the board of directors, 1 for each of the 5 diversity caucuses, and then to also fully integrate those caucuses into our organization. They have been, the best way to describe it, parallel supporting organizations for many years. The second thing we talked about and took a position on was Senate Bill 7, which is Murat Sachi's bill related to local control. And we took a position to watch it carefully and form a task force to assess what it means. This would be a proposal to put a measure on the statewide November 22 ballot if 2/3 of the legislature agrees to it and the governor. But it would basically say that if a local land use issue, zoning standard is in conflict with state law, the local standard controls. Now, the likelihood of the state government giving up their constitutionally granted right to override what we're doing at the local level, but we are continuing to watch it and have a task force work on that. And finally, I will mention Saturday, October 9th is going to be Community Service Day this year. We are bringing it back in a modified form. We will have a food drive again, but also we are looking to have 10 to 15 outdoor-only, simple, basic projects in parks, gardens, open space, at schools for cleanup, gardening, landscaping, and maybe some things that might need to be painted. So do mark your calendar for that morning. Council members, mark your calendars for that morning. We will have work for all of you. And thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Silva. All right, I have a few updates. I participated in a climate change discussion with other local Contra Costa County officials last month, and all of us sharing best practices of what we're doing and talking about different areas that we all have on our upcoming agendas. So the good news is that Walnut Creek is certainly a leader in this position, even in the county, and we look forward to the next priorities update on on how things are going on Phase 2. Council Member Silva and I are on the Rebound Committee, as she had mentioned, and as we just heard earlier tonight, we're going to be continuing outdoor dining through 2021 per the current emergency order. We'll also be having Another update come in October after a robust discussion with merchants downtown, as well as residents, and seeing what other types of modifications can be done for the future, should we continue this as part of our Downtown Next program. So there's a lot that is going to be on the table with that, and that'll be a very interesting meeting, I think, for everybody to hear and participate in. I am the liaison to the County Connection Board, and there's a couple of things, updates there. First is there's something called Pass to Class that is going to be coming out. It's free rides for students from August 1st through October 31st. Applications are on the County Connection website and will be promoted at the schools. Due to the Delta variant and its transmission almost entirely through unvaccinated people, as we heard City Manager say, 99.93%. That is almost entirely. Masks will likely be required still on public transit through the end of 2021. But if you have a student that takes County Connection or is looking at that, please go on to their website to get a pass to class. I do also want to mention that those of you who are familiar and work directly with County Connection, Rick Ramos here, who is the General Manager of County Connection, will be retiring at the end of the year. After 24 years as GM. Assistant General Manager Bill Churchill was voted to be approved for the next General Manager, effective upon Rick's retirement. And having worked with Bill, he's an excellent choice. Sure we'll hear much more from that. I see Andy writing this down already. Walnut Creek has a new music video that was just released. It's called Come Downtown. Go to YouTube and search for Walnut Creek Come Downtown 2021. It will also be played during the next City Council break, whether that's in 5 minutes or an hour, we'll see. So that it's just a fun way letting people know that there is a lot of activity downtown and, well, come downtown. For one of the things that are downtown are Summer Sounds. And they have one more free concert at the Lesher Center on the Rudney Plaza this Thursday beginning at 5:30. And if you haven't been to one of these yet, it's terrific. Get there early for seats. It is really just vibrant. It's free. So, well, come downtown. Farmers Market Council is back in the booth. We heard from several council members. Council members will be at the, well, I should say one council member will be at the booth every Sunday that's a non-holiday from 10 to 12. So it's a great chance to be able to talk directly one-on-one again with your council members. The Walnut Creek Heroes nominations are open again. Go to the Walnut Creek website at walnut-creek.org to nominate someone who has gone above and beyond this year. This will be closing on Monday, so please get it in quickly. And the link is on the banner and the homepage. I was at former Chamber of Commerce President Jay Hoyer's retirement. That was a nice send-off, and Bob Linscheid was there, and we look forward to having him speak here at an upcoming council meeting. I also attended the Port Chicago Memorial, which was the 77th anniversary of the Port Chicago explosion. We had a speaker at our Memorial Day ceremony here, a Reverend Diana McDaniel. She also was there for that, but it was a touching tribute with lots of historical memories. And I'd actually never been to Port Chicago, the memorial itself. And if you haven't had a chance to go, I'd encourage going over sometime over the summer or into the fall. It's really moving, and it is one of the least known one of the least known World War II events. And here it's in our own backyard. And finally, we'll talk more about this at the end of the meeting. Dick Rainey has a memorial and celebration of life tomorrow at the Lesher Center. And of course, Dick Rainey is a former sheriff, former assembly member, and state senator. So we'll be closing the meeting in his honor tonight. And that is my report. So let me ask if the council, if we want a 10-minute break right now, or do you want to wait for the staff presentation on the microhomes? Are we okay? Keep go on through. All right. So, all right, so next on the agenda then is a consideration item titled Micro Home Village Presentation. And so I will ask the staff to provide the presentation now.
Good evening, Mayor Wilk and members of the council. I'm Margot Ernst, the housing manager in the Community Development Department. And first, I would like to say how nice it is to have the opportunity to both see and present to you live and in person today. Tonight's item for consideration is a presentation sponsored by the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force on micro-home villages developed in partnership with faith-based communities. Next slide. Oh, I don't need to say that. The presentation schedule will include an introduction from Donna Colombo, who is joining us remotely. And Donna is the co-chair, one of the co-chairs for the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force. She's also a member of the Housing and Shelter Subcommittee of the task force. That will be followed by a presentation on the micro home village concept by Reverend Jake Metcalf, who is with First Presbyterian Church of Hayward and also founder of Firm Foundation Community Housing. And then I will close out with a brief presentation on some of the options for processing micro home villages. The micro-home village concept that you will hear about tonight was presented to the Council Housing and Community Development Committee in April of this year. The committee, whose members include Councilmember Silva and Councilmember Darling, have recommended that the council receive this presentation and provide input and direction to staff and the presenters on the micro-home village concept as a tool for providing housing solutions for unhoused residents. Now I'd like to introduce Donna Colombo, who will start us off with an introduction. And is she available? Oh. Can we hear her? Donna, are you there? I also can't move the slide. I can't click the slide forward. Oh, there we go.
Hi, I'm sorry, something happened there. So, hello, good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm Donna Colombo, as Margot introduced me. And I am here representing the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force Housing and Shelter Committee. Next slide, please. Here with me tonight, and you will hear from in a moment, Reverend Jake Metcalf, as Margot also introduced, founder and of Firm Foundation Community Housing, and also pastor of First Presbyterian Church Hayward. Cheryl O'Connor should be also on the call. She's on the board of directors of Firm Foundation and outgoing executive director of Homemade Northern California. And it was Cheryl who introduced us to Pastor Jake. So we're excited about that. She's also on the Housing and Shelter Committee. Deanne Pern, executive director, Hope Solutions, should be listening in. And also we may have Reverend Mark Burnham from Grace Presbyterian Walnut Creek. Next slide. So in keeping with the mission of the task force, our committee spent a lot of time researching how we might utilize micro-home villages as a solution to the crisis, the housing crisis in the Bay Area, specifically Walnut Creek. And we were excited to be introduced to Pastor Jake. We loved what he's doing at First Presbyterian Hayward, and we asked him to present the concept to the whole council. He did present, as Margot said, to the Housing and Community Development Committee. And we were so excited by that presentation, we felt you all needed to see it. So in a moment, he will present to you. Next slide, Margot. But I'd also like to respectfully ask for council's consideration to help us find ways to accommodate micro-home villages on faith-based property by adding flexibility to zoning requirements to encourage innovative housing solutions, permitting micro-home villages as permanent housing on faith-based properties, encouraging microhome villages to address the affordable housing and homelessness crisis in our community, and adding microhome villages as a strategy in the updated housing element. Next. These are just a few resources, links that you can explore on your own, but I wanted you to know during the presentation that we're not the only ones who are thinking about using microhome villages across the state. I'm happy to think that there's a possibility we might be able to do that here in Walnut Creek. So at this time, I'd really like to turn the presentation over to Pastor Jake.
That's the right button. I am too tall for your camera. No problem, I got this. Before we dive into microhomes and microhome villages, I do want to say thank you. It's my first time at the Walnut Creek City Council meeting. Believe it or not, I haven't been here before. But it really is good to hear politics being done with decorum, with laughter, and with the ability to be civil with one another. I've enjoyed being here. Like, I'm having a good time, as much as that sounds wild.
Can you be here every meeting?
I can, and I can come up at the end and tell you how amazing you are at every meeting.
Thank you.
I'm wearing two hats. I am the lead pastor at First Presbyterian Church of Hayward. I also am founder with my partner, Terrence Sandeliak, of Firm Foundation Community Housing, which really got launched out of our work at First Pres. So I do believe, and I think you're all aware, that we have in the Bay Area an ongoing housing crisis. And Contra Costa County and Walnut Creek is not immune to an ongoing raise in our unsheltered population and community. And so in response to that, we really have seen the power of this movement, a movement of public, private, and faith community leaders working together. We saw it in Alameda County. We're seeing it across multiple counties. Firm Foundation is now doing work in Contra Costa County, Solana County, Alameda County, looks like San Joaquin County. When public, private, and faith community leaders come together, I do believe we really can solve these problems. For many, many years, we felt like the unsheltered thing is something we can't tackle. It's just going to be here. I don't think that's true. So the crisis, you're aware of it. It's exponential. Right now in Alameda County, where I live and work, every person we get housed, 2 more are becoming homeless. That's the reality that we're facing. I think our next point in time count, everybody that I've talked to will show that again. They're expecting a 30 to 40% rise Bay Area wide. It's growing, and homelessness has doubled. You're aware of that. I think also we're aware that 80% of our unsheltered population is local. That these are people that we know. Someone went to high school with, someone played soccer with, someone was on a team with. So I do believe also we have a moral obligation. I have personally a theological one from my own faith tradition, but I do think we as a community have a moral obligation to provide housing. The United Nations came out very clearly and very strongly saying housing is a human right, not a commodity that's for some and not for others. And we're finding in our work as a church and also as Firm Foundation that if we don't create housing, we're condemning people to die slowly on our streets. That's not dramatic. That's the reality that we've seen. I've done too many corner candlelight vigils for folks who have passed away on our streets. Still working on it. There we go. I'll go back one. That picture right that you see in the bottom corner, that's myself representing the faith community. That's Supervisor Nate Miley from Alameda County, District 4. And that's my friend Cheryl O'Connor. And Chrisanne is here. Chrisanne, if you can wave. She's the new Executive Director of HomeAid. HomeAid represents the nonprofit arm of the building industry. So to complete the first project that we did, the building industry and HomeAid came to the table in a powerful way. And I think they're planning on doing the same on projects up here. The story of tiny homes begins like this. I was at my church office working on a sermon late at night, and a gentleman came to the door, and I think a lot of our faith community leaders feel the same way. A gentleman came to the door and knocked on the door, and needed that night was a cold, rainy Bay Area night. You know them well. We hope for more kind of cold, rainy Bay Area nights. And he asked for a blanket. And I went and scouring around the church, and I found a blanket. And I have a little awning outside of our door, and as he walked into the night in that downpour, I thought to myself, we can do better than this. I looked around at our property, our parking lot, our building, and said, we can do better. And that began this journey. We began with a parking lot program where people are doing safe parking in their cars. We developed a mutual action plan with them because our goal is to end involuntary homelessness. There are some of our brothers and sisters and fellow children that are going to choose the streets, but there are 80% of that population that's not. So in that parking lot program, we learned that we had 10 spots, and every time about 6 or 7 of those individuals had jobs. So our first tiny home village at our spot, you're looking at the 6 there, opened up, and in those homes was a woman who was working as a receptionist at Kaiser, was a woman who was working for the DMV, was a woman who was providing in-care services to seniors, was a woman who was driving for Lyft and working for the census. These are the folks who are on our streets living in cars. And it's a larger portion of that population. And we went through the whole process. It took us a year and a half. I was not trained in development, believe it or not. They don't train pastors in that. But learned it. Learned CUP, TUP, SUP, HCD, all the, you're all nodding, you all know that. But we learned all about that, went through site plan, entitlements, and funding. We learned a ton of things along the way. We were CDBG funded for this first project. And we were able to build the homes. Here begins some of the uniqueness. They're technically factory-built homes. And you're able to put a temporary factory almost anywhere with a fence and an office and a quality control manual. So the homes were built off-site at Crosswinds. These are the folks that came to the table that Homemade brought. So again, public, Nate Miley's office, we helped push entitlements through and zoning ordinances. Alameda County had to rewrite zoning ordinances in order for this project to get through because it was new. The same kind of considerations that staff is putting in front of you tonight. Then the building industry came to the table. XL Construction, Brookfield, Richmond, Cobill, Brana, Pacific Interwest, Pulte Homes, they all came to the table donating trade and materials. So the end cost of the unit was $0. They brought all of that to the table. They're planning on doing as much. I can't promise they'll do it on the next project, but they're planning on bringing those same folks to do these micro home villages going forward. A quick 1.5-minute video on kind of being able to see the process as Homemade has built them. Go ahead. Units were built at Crosswinds and then transported to First Pres, craned into place. I brought my kids that day. It's been their favorite day, literally in history, to watch homes fly in the air. In the end, it is about these residents. And that's Patricia on the right. She was the senior in-home care provider. We since have gotten her permanent housing from being with us in the tiny homes. On the left is Betty and JoJo. They're still living in one of our homes, and we're closing in on housing for them. This is Jamal. It's another resident, and I would love for you just to hear a little bit from Jamal.
Hi, my name is Jamal Haynes, and I'm very excited to be moving into tiny homes. I've been just working my butt off, cleaning houses, driving for Uber, and I finally got an opportunity to move in a home and hopefully maybe into a permanent home sooner or later. But this is very exciting, and I look forward to the future of being successful here in the tiny homes.
Next slide. Jamal, once he moved in, we have a Trader Joe's also on our campus that we work with. He got a job at Trader Joe's, so now he has the world's shortest commute and is doing incredibly well there. I'll keep going. The homes themselves, I'm going to give you a virtual tour later, but I want to do just some things we learned. We learned along the way that other faith communities, municipalities, and owners of surplus land, people want to help end this issue. Nobody's excited about it and saying more of it. But we had to kind of figure out that how. UC Berkeley, at the same time we were doing these homes, reported that there are 5,000 acres of usable land owned by faith communities. It's the next big land move. The faith community and many other municipalities, they're not designed for and experienced in the development of these tiny home villages. And we were getting phone calls, like along the way, we want to do this on our land, how do we do this? Municipalities, surplus landowners, all of the above. And so we ended up starting Firm Foundation Community Housing, the nonprofit, to do this work. Once we receive entitlements, we can build that tiny home village in under 6 months. We're finishing up this week, we'll finish a 34-unit project for Alameda County. They transitioned their navigation center from congregate to tiny home. On that project, construction-wise, took us 8 months to do the 34 units. Our current cost for a tiny home is 1/5 of the cost of a comparable studio unit in a permanent affordable housing development. We can meet this crisis. I'm not saying this is the only use. We need everything we can have in our tool belt to end the housing crisis. Tiny home villages are a piece of that puzzle. If it's not highest and best use for land, we should think about what a 4-story, 120-unit complex looks like. We should figure out what highest and best use is. But oftentimes in faith community places, they're not ready for that. It's not big enough for that. It's not suited for that. We can do different things. All the units that we do are HUD and HCD approved units. They're built to the CRC code. They're third-party inspected, so it makes them eligible for housing vouchers, rental subsidies, rapid rehousing vouchers, and other programs like that. We created Firm Foundation Community Housing to be that one-stop shop so a church like Grace can call one number, and then we can do the work to pull together all those partners. Operational partners, architects, engineers, general contractors, homemade, Hope Solutions to really make a village work. Last video is a virtual tour of the units that would be very, very similar to what's being talked about and kind of worked on and designed at Grace Presbyterian. Yep, go ahead. Welcome to one of our projects here in San Leandro that we're working on. I'm right here at the door of one of the units that we have created. It's 224 square feet. It's designed to be handicapped accessible. At this project that we're on here, there's going to be 10 of these and then 24 more of what we call our basic unit, which is a bit smaller. But I'm excited to show you this one. I think it turned out beautifully. So come on in. Let me show you. If you come on in, you can take a look at what we would call the kitchen space. Mini fridge, mini freezer, stove top, microwave, sink. Again, this unit is designed to be for someone who might be in a wheelchair, so there's plenty of turnaround space. We really wanted to design units that were humanizing. As Firm Foundation, what we're trying to do is really just like miniaturize all the same amenities that we have in our home as much as possible. So you're gonna find showers and toilets, and come on in, I want you to see the bathroom. Architect team that we worked with on this project did a really incredible job, and we are learning as we go for every project. So every time we get a chance to design again, I think we're making improvements. Also, HVAC system, a kind of dresser that goes in here with a TV on top of it, and then a bed. Currently we have one in here that converts to a futon, but also enough space for a solid double bed right in there. We just got a chance to tour the unit here at our project in San Leandro, but I wanted to also show you a bit of how these units are being constructed. It's very unique and I think pretty innovative. These are factory-built, California HCD-approved units. We were able to set up a temporary factory. We're here in the parking lot on this project. These units are being constructed at the same time the site development is happening right over here. When the units get to a certain point, we crane them from here, we move them onto that kind of site, and that again is helping us to reduce construction time. So on this project, we broke ground for these units late October and are currently scheduled to finish early July for 34 of these units. But it also is able to help us to do it at about 1/5 of the cost of a comparable unit in a permanent affordable housing structure. I'll skip through a bunch of this. These are some projects we have currently in the entitlement process. That's 5 units at Bethel Community Church. This is 12 units at Hayward First Church of the Nazarene. They have a huge parking lot that wasn't being used. You can kind of see that in that photo there. This is the South Hayward Parish where we're putting 7 units. We're currently working with Hayward and San Leandro at both of those projects. And I'm going to show you just where we're at with Grace so you can get an idea. It's not a finished concept, it's iterative, it's in its beginning stages, but we're really pretty excited about it. That's 6 units. You can see that there in an office and a laundry in a section of the parking lot that Grace really doesn't use anymore. And I think that picture really kind of captures some outdoor space. It's out of the floodplain. I think we're really pretty excited about this project. We met with them, with the team at Grace, and they've got some work to do too. They've got to get their, kind of congregational kind of approvals and designs. But I wanted to give you guys a scope of kind of what we're talking about with these micro home villages and what they can be. We've created the system to help it multiply, where if you're able to do this at 10 churches, 60 units becomes a real thing, and it becomes a real thing within 18 months if we want to do that kind of work. And that's an aerial view of kind of what it would look like. They've created a great pathway that kind of would weave through Grace's property right there along the creek. That is kind of some of the other projects we're on. We're currently in the middle, kind of talking about a movement that our team is in the middle in construction, in entitlements, and in design. We have a total of 192 units currently across those 4 counties. And really, I think when you stumble upon would be the best words, a real solution to a real crisis, this is what emerges. In the end, I do think we have to do the work to the best of our ability as faith community leaders, as public servants, and as the business community that Chris Ann represents. All of us coming together for Betty, for JoJo, Patricia, and Jamal. All these are our community who have names, not just the unhoused or the homeless, names and stories that go with them. So that would end my section. I can do questions or whatever Margot would like.
Thank you.
I was planning to just close off with the final end of the presentation and then open up to questions for any of the presenters.
Let's do that.
Don't go too far.
The clicker's right there. I'll try
Thank
not to
you.
break it.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Good. Yeah, that's the right spot. So, thank you for the presentation. So as noted in the agenda report, this unique type of development involving a small cluster of micro homes on the same site as a faith-based community facility is not well suited for our existing residential land use classifications. Therefore, staff has identified 2 options for processing micro home village applications. One is through the special use permit process, and the other is by creating a new land use classification through an amendment to the zoning ordinance. And I'm going to talk just briefly about each of these and then we'll open up for questions. The special use permit process, The Planning Commission has the authority to grant special use permits in any zoning district for uses which cannot be classified into any of the land use classifications that currently exist in the zoning ordinance, but which are either integral parts of the community or provide a necessary service to the community. Special use permits are processed in the same manner as conditional use permits, which require a public hearing by the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission has the authority to adopt such conditions as it deems necessary to protect the best interest of the neighboring community and the neighborhood and the surrounding area. I've also noted that in addition to the special use permit process or separate from it, microhome villages currently would also trigger design review. The other option is through an amendment to the zoning ordinance, the council could elect to create new land use classification specific to this unique type of development. In conjunction with creating the new land use classification, council could identify all of the corresponding zoning districts where it would be allowed and whether it would be allowed by right or with a conditional use permit. Council could also identify any applicable development standards. The zoning ordinance amendment, which may create a more streamlined process in the long run, would require time and resources up front to examine the breadth of the change. So staff estimates that it would take between 12 and 18 months to assess the implications for multiple zoning districts and to conduct an extensive public outreach process, and would also include public hearings with both Planning Commission and City Council. So in addition to tonight's presenters, Andrew Smith, the head of long range and transportation planning, is here tonight, who can assist with answering questions as well. And I believe Donna Colombo is still here. We also have a couple people available on Zoom who can answer questions. We have someone from Hope Solutions and also from Homemade.
All right, thank you.
Here we have one more.
Oh. All right, I guess that means questions.
Or we didn't make a good presentation, is that?
All right, thank you very much. This is really interesting. Let's, I know people have questions, so should we start off with Councilmember Darling again?
We'll start. I obviously saw this when it came through HCD committee. One of the things that struck me, the target that you're looking at to move into these, those are not necessarily people without income. Is that correct?
I can answer, and Reverend Jake, you can also supplement my answer. They are required to have some type of income. It may or may not be through working, so it could be through employment. It could also be through public benefits or through like a voucher or some kind of rent subsidy, because the units do need to generate some revenue, if that's correct. I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, that's the best format that we have currently. That we've made them housing voucher, rapid rehousing eligible.
Mm-hmm.
And also that usually comes in a split rent format, where if someone's working, the usual format is something like 30% of the rent they pay, the housing voucher takes up the rest.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to create the best village format. We're really excited to work with Hope Solutions and Deanne Pern. They do an incredible job surrounding their residents with wraparound services to really set them up well for success.
Mm-hmm. And so when somebody moves in, the expectation is that there will be services along with the opportunity to live in the house.
Yes.
And there's expectations around their performance in paying rent and...
Yes, the nature of that is a little bit forward and backward.
Yeah.
It's not quite as clean as we would always like for it to be, as people are recovering from numerous crises in their life. But yes, that is overall the kind of structure that you're trying to help people move through. We don't call it transitional housing. Transitional sets a date. Like, hey, in 18 months you've got to move on.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is our housing system is so short in supply. Even someone who is ready, document ready, eligible for a, one-bedroom permanent affordable housing unit might be on a list for that for 3 to 4 years. I mean, especially as you prioritize what's, and rightly so, people who are medically fragile, who have more of an acute need, are kind of stepping in line along the way. It leaves someone who, like Jamal, who's working at Trader Joe's and doing quite well, doesn't climb that list as rapidly sometimes.
And then what's been your experience with the existing as far as need for police services and, crises within the units?
We've had our residents, 6 units on our campus for 12 months. We had a ribbon cutting late February, like right before the pandemic really hit. We have had 0 calls for service to the 6 tiny home residents. That's been our experience. And we also have a preschool on campus. So all of our residents had to be background checked to the level of volunteers at the preschool.
Oh, okay.
Due to its proximity. So for those 6 units, just for context, and I think we'll have the same here. I mean, and Hope will run a different system than we did at First Pres, but for an idea, we for 6 units had over 60 applications. And so my assumption will be it'll be somewhat the same.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
All right, let's move on to the other member of the Housing Committee, Cindy
Thank
Zill.
you. Well, my questions are for the pastor. First of all, do you still have the beard?
I trimmed it for you all. I mean, but
At first I didn't recognize you on the film, and then I went, no, that's the same voice. So there you have it, a little more humor.
I trimmed it because my wife had just had enough. That's the reality of that, if we're being honest. Right.
If it's not longer hair, it's just temperament.
Right. Well, a bit of
one in my household. So you say these are manufactured. Which part, does that actually mean manufactured in a construction plant someplace and then put on a truck the way you'd see manufactured homes for a mobile home park? Or is this manufactured in a parking lot close to the site?
There's a little nuance to it. They're actually not manufactured, they're factory built.
Okay.
Right, which has a little nuance to it. So factory built allows you to set up a temporary factory in a parking lot. Like, for example, if we wanted to, and Grace hasn't approved this by any way, shape, or form, but in theory, you could set up a parking lot right in Grace's parking lot. So you could set up a fence and a temporary factory, and that's where Homemade kind of comes through and does their best work with they send their plumbers come through, their framers come through, their Pulte Homes is sending their framers. Brunel Construction sends their plumbers. XL Construction sends their electricians. But it's all happening in that factory, which is a temporary factory according to NTA, which is one of California's third-party inspectors. You get the factory approved, and so really the whole unit side is outside of Walnut Creek's building department. It's being inspected, and it gets a label, a sticker from the inspector when that finalizes from NTA.
And the plans for these, are these custom plans? These 6 will be custom and different, or are these models that have been pre-designed and pre-approved by HUD and HCD?
It's much more streamlined to have a pre-approved.
Yeah, I would think.
That's our current design. The ones that you saw there, the virtual tour is really close to not the exact same unit that would potentially be. That's that design that we would use.
And then to what extent did Hayward or San Leandro or Alameda County need to weigh in on the discretionary part of what color you're picking? I mean,
none of those have weighed in on what color. Well, technically Alameda County's, GSA team weighed in on what color because they're the landowner, right? And so the churches have a bit more way of color scheme. They want it to match their architecture, if you will. Like, we're working at a project in Vallejo where the church has that very Santa Barbara architecture feel to it. So we're going to design the units to be a bit more to fit that.
mission style.
Right, mission style. Thank you for that. New things I've learned. Technically, the city, if you would inspect and have review process over the planning, the zoning, and the site development. Everything underground up to where the units connect. State third-party inspector, NTA, has the unit into the connections, if that makes sense.
Thank you. You answered the question about these are not transients or transitional. These are the working poor in a large number of cases. They have jobs. They're living in their cars.
That has been our experience so far, and/or seniors whose level of income doesn't allow for them to really rent. You know what I mean, like a one-bedroom apartment in the neighborhood they've been in for 30 years, like a Walnut Creek, like here, and/or someone who's on disability. You mean, and there's a combination in there.
Okay.
We haven't done yet, though. I think Hope Solutions could, directly that, hey, we're doing an encampment sweep. We've got that probably isn't where Grace wants to be. That's a different kind of level of work. But it is hey, we've been in Project Home Key, like we're now sunsetting those. That residence, that population tends to be a really good fit for these villages.
But that's not what we're talking about at Grace Presbyterian.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I was kind of keeping that on a wider scale.
So Homemade, which is the building industry, they provide the trades. And,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
and then the Hope Solutions is your partner here in the Contra Costa area who will manage, rent up the properties, manage the units, select those who will be housed, and provide the wraparound services.
Yes.
And the church provides the property.
Yes.
And Firm Foundation raises the additional funding for materials, and the factory.
Factory-built housing?
Yeah.
Yes, mostly. I hope that Grace Presbyterian or any faith community, because again, we're talking about maybe a wider, and I hope a wider zoning ordinance to allow this to happen on more faith communities. The faith community is really good at some things. They're not particularly gifted always at development and getting through an entitlement process, but they are really, really good at surrounding people with loving community, bringing dinners, bringing meals, checking in, and being relationally present. And that's a huge part of healing for our residents who have had some kind of major crisis in family, in network, and that's how they ended up usually on the streets in the first place. Something broke in a family secure network, and sort of replaced that. That's what church is. So I hope Grace and other churches do that work. Not only is it land, but it's also involvement. So what Firm Foundation does is absolutely that. It brings all those partners to the table to really make a village successful. We become essentially the developer. And so Grace, in a lot of ways, hires us to execute, to make this all happen. And so we're part of raising funds. Hope Solution might be part of raising funds. There's public funds. All of our projects really have been publicly funded so far. And so all of that kind of works together with the faith community leaders, the building industry, and then the public sector.
Okay, so what's 1/5 of the cost of a studio in a multifamily, affordable complex? What does that translate to, and what are you thinking that this will cost at Grace?
It's really difficult to tell until you get into the engineering.
So the utilities issues,
How far you're going to trench? Is it uphill? Do you need a pump house to get, to get water and sewage up to the street? Is there an overload? Do we have to call in PG&E to do an upgrade? Those questions are unanswered.
Okay.
At the moment. But the cost has been anywhere, and so I'm not hold me to nothing. It's great pastor speak. Hold me to nothing that I'm about to say. Anywhere between $120,000, and that includes everything: your connection fees, your permitting fees, your underground trenching, your foundations, your landscaping, your fencing, your trash enclosure, all those pieces. I think the numbers are between $120,000 and $175,000 per unit.
Wow. Okay.
60% of that, by the way, 60% of that tends to be other costs besides the unit.
Because your labor is being donated.
For the unit, you still have to do the infrastructure work.
No, what I'm saying is when you eliminate the donated labor and all of that, you really get down to how much Central Sanitary District is going to charge to hook up the sewer line.
And it's always a negotiation. Those structures haven't changed to accommodate to micro homes. So the structure is still like as if you were building a 2,000 square foot home that's going to be there for, 90 years. The connection fee is the same as it would be for a 10 to 15 year, 220 square foot unit. And it just doesn't, we're still in that process of, that's where the innovation hasn't caught up to the systems.
One of the things that was mentioned is if whether we go through a special use permit or a zoning ordinance, conditions might be applied or suggested on the project. What kind of conditions, development conditions, have the communities of Hayward, Alameda County, San Leandro required on your already entitled and built projects?
I'm trying to remember the conditions. I mean, the best comparable example is the 6 units on our site. We are under a CUP, a 5-year CUP, and the conditions were things like, and which was zero problem, work with the sheriff's department because we're unincorporated on a security plan, remove a storage container off a parking spot that we were using for like Boy Scout stuff so that there's more parking available. It's
Those
17 of those.
Okay.
It wasn't anything that felt constricting or I think everybody's pretty excited about how the micro home project has been going top to bottom.
Those are my questions, Mayor, of the pastor. My other questions are more technical about the two alternative approaches, but how about, I'll just let a few other people have an opportunity.
Sure, with the,
dive in.
okay.
Hey, Mayor, briefly, if I could, I just wanted to follow up on what Pastor stated as a quality check on his numbers for if you're interested. So you may recall a few months back, we received an update on developing 100% affordable unit project, 100% affordable housing project on 699 YVR, and the average cost for a one-bedroom unit was $710,000. So 20% puts us right at $140,000 in the range that he mentioned. So that is quite impressive in terms of the cost difference.
Wow, yeah, it sure is. Let's go to Councilmember Askew.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the, gosh, it's a happy presentation. We don't get that many. I have a couple of questions that are technical, but I'm going to go with the other ones. Does this have to be done on church property, or could any nonprofit structure with parking spaces participate?
I would say that any nonprofit structure, any surplus land anywhere.
Okay.
I think there's been a natural connectivity to the faith community because in multiple faith communities, in my brothers and sisters who are Buddhist and Jewish and Muslim, we all have in our kind of traditional sacred documents a need to take care of the least of these. Like we're called to compassion in that way, so it has a natural mission fit.
Mm-hmm.
But we are getting phone calls now, and we're working on projects with surplus landowners as well, who are like, I have this piece of property. I don't want to give it out to, for a 99-year lease or a 60-year regulatory agreement, but for the next 15 years, if that's your math, I can imagine, let's do something with it, for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
All of our units are removable. They're engineered to be permanent structures, but they're also engineered to be lifted on and lifted off. And so that's a unique part of what we're able to do.
Well, that just brings me to a different question, which is earthquake and other kinds of safety things are
all above code.
Okay.
NTA has to inspect it. It has to be it's built with the same construction methods that our homes are built, just smaller.
Right. Furnishings. Do the little houses come with furniture? I mean, they come with standard things like sinks and stoves and things like that. But the rest of it is, whose responsibility is that?
It could fall either way. Like on our Alameda County project, the operator had that in their budget. They wanted to furnish it. It's like 15 of those units on that 34-unit project are for medical respite, which is an incredible thing. If you don't have enough of that, let's find it. But like they wanted beds that are a certain way, you know what I mean? Like, and some of them are ADA, so like the furniture's changing per unit. On our 6-bedroom project, it was part of what Homemade did. They loved it. They're like, hey, we've got people who owe us. So the builders put their, their pressure on some of their suppliers to provide free furniture. They're going to come fully furnished to whoever the resident is.
Okay. And what kinds of responsibilities, we talked about it a little bit, what kind of responsibilities do the people who are in the properties have for their daily expenses, like electricity and food? Is that included in the rent, or is it a separate?
Utilities are included in the structure. It just makes that simpler than having to sub-meter each small unit. That just doesn't financially make sense.
Right.
And so it's included in kind of the whole financial structure, of which the faith communities also get a land lease portion. So it's not a huge number, but in this day and age, the pandemic has been hard on the faith community as well. Anything helps, like to maintain their own building.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a small piece of that also goes to.
Okay. If you give me just one teeny second, because I'm sorting out my questions like Councilmember Silva did. I think I'm down to the other questions, so I relinquish my.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Haskell. Mayor Pro Tem Francois.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Reverend, for the presentation. I think my questions mostly have to do with Hope Solutions, if someone
Great.
From them is on the line.
I think Deanne Pern is.
Deanne is here.
Is that Deanne?
No, can you let Deanne in?
Well, that view is showing my best side right there.
There's a little bit of a delay from when the time you press the button. Here she is.
There's Deanne.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Deanne Parent, Executive Director at Hope Solutions. Thanks for your time.
Hi, Deanne. Thank you for being here tonight. Nice to see you. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the services that you provide to the tenants of these types of villages?
Absolutely. So Hope Solutions is a longstanding institution in Contra Costa County. We were formerly known as Contra Costa Interfaith Housing, started in the late 90s by a huge collaboration of a variety of faith communities with the express purpose of creating permanent housing and providing vital support services so people can reach their full potential and live in dignity. So Hope Solutions is a full service operation. We largely operate permanent supportive housing programs. We operate Garden Park Apartments in Pleasant Hill. We have scattered site master lease properties. We are doing site-based services at a variety of properties around Contra Costa County. And the services are comprehensive. We have both a property management team that is collecting rents, dealing with repairs, outsourcing repairs that we can't handle. And then we have a service team. We have a trained case management team that's helping people sort of set goals and work towards those goals. And we also have clinical staff on the team who help people with deeper underlying mental health issues. So it's really a very comprehensive set of services to help people meet them where they're at and help them get where they're trying to go.
That sounds terrific. How often does a tenant, would you interact with a tenant? Is it on a weekly basis, monthly basis?
Yes, our case management, our caseloads are low, and I hate that phrase, it's dehumanizing, but we are interacting with our residents at least once a week and more if needed. So we're checking in, we're on site, there's an office in this potential design where we would have staff on site part of the time. So we also just have a presence in the community, and it is about that relationship building. We're there, we see when things are going off, we intervene before things happen, we redirect and we help people through whatever it is. So we're pretty hands-on, and it's at least weekly and more if needed.
That's great. And then the last question I had, can you discuss a little bit about the selection or the vetting process? You get applications. How do you choose the 6 of the 60 that apply for these homes?
Honestly, a lot of it depends on the funding source. So one of the things that we do for the county is we are the only provider that operates a HOPWA contract. So we serve people living with HIV/AIDS. We're not talking about necessarily having that population in this particular project, but if that was the funding there, then we would be, matching the population. So what we've talked about with this particular community is a real interest in supporting seniors. We currently operate a permanent housing program for seniors. We partner with the county H3 system to identify the right people for the right programs. A lot of those folks, as Jake mentioned, would probably have SSI or some kind of public benefit. And, we would look at income and we would look at vulnerability, and then we would match the right people in the property and make sure that we have the services in place to meet whatever needs they present with.
That's very helpful. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. We're excited.
We have one more question from Councilmember Haskew.
Yes, thank you. What we've all talked about right now is pretty internal. What is it like to be in there? How do we get the people? What do we do about the neighborhoods? I mean, you say anything that has to do with somebody unhoused and they immediately think we're going to look like downtown San Francisco. So, how do you handle the outreach?
I think in the end, everything is relational, and you do your best to listen, and you do your best to introduce. Like, one of the reasons why we just took a 24-second video of Jamal is to help some of our neighbors understand who we're talking about. People naturally, and without blame, go to their worst case scenario of what's about to happen to their neighborhood, and so we have to help them work backwards. We create beautiful micro home villages so you can see it, that feel good to be in your neighborhood. I mean, that space is currently unused parking lot space, right? And so you're going to beautify that space. You have to bring the renderings, you have to have the conversations, and that all being said, I think you're aware of this as public servants, not everybody is still going to be for it. You have to kind of work towards doing your best work to listen, and then still doing what's best by all the community members in your jurisdiction, which would include the unhoused. But you just relationally do the work, and there's no other real way to.
All right, thank you. I have just a couple questions, then I guess we'll figure out where the next questions come from. And this looks promising, so thank you. So, and I apologize if you went over this at the beginning, but is this strictly for the homeless, or was it very low income, but they happen to be living above their means somewhere else and they want to move in there?
From what we've done so far, it's been the federal definition of homelessness, which would include living in a car, which would include not having a permanent place, or couch surfing. It has all those definitions kind of within it. Okay. I think you can build on a bigger, wider scale, like taking the concept beyond grace to Walnut Creek as a whole. I think you can build micro villages that would be worked for the ELI community, the extremely low income community, which is another kind of really on the edge. They're paying 70-80% is going to rent. Let's figure out a new system. I think you can also create micro home villages for seniors who are in that same space, who might not come attached to a housing voucher or a subsidy, who just have a Social Security income that's not a much to maintain. But our products so far have been for the federal definition of unsheltered.
Thank you. Who approaches the churches, or how does that work?
I think I was going to throw it to you, Donna.
All right.
Donna Colombo does. Here she is.
Donna Colombo does. No, but we did do that. So the Housing Committee approached Multi-Faith Action Coalition together with HomeAid to ask if they would send out a communication to the local congregations, and about, I believe, a mailing list of about 500 letters went out introducing this concept and asking if there was any interest. Along with that, I personally reached out to Grace Presbyterian with the same letter, and was fortunate to get a response from Pastor Mark saying, yeah, come talk to us. So that's the process we've used to date. And we did not go, we received interest from other cities, congregations in other cities besides Walnut Creek. So St. Bonaventure in Concord has shown interest. The city of Antioch is very interested, and they're considering a micro home village of 80 units. So it wasn't just, so you asked that question before, it wasn't just churches or faith-based property, but it could also be city-owned property or public. So that's the process we've used so far. And we also felt that if we could get a little further down the road, we could have more information, more solid information, some designs to show, some success stories, we could go back out to that same mailing list and ask them again, would you be interested?
Great, thank you. That's definitely helpful. And who actually takes care then of cleaning the area around the tiny homes? Is that left to the church?
Deanne?
That would be our staff. That would be our property management team. And we also rely heavily on partnerships with faith communities. So we may get groups of volunteers in, but that would squarely be us as the operator.
Great.
And the residents as well. I'm a firm believer that there's part of this is helping people take responsibility for caring for a home.
Yes, we at Garden Park Apartments, we have 4 resident monitors who are part of our staff, who are residents that live there, and they serve a function in a similar capacity on that property. Thanks, Donna.
Right.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Those are my questions. So now I think we circle back to questions that would be for our staff. Thank you very much. This is
And just before they hop up, if you want a completely unsolicited opinion, because again, I'm a pastor and we give them, I would advocate for using a both and. I think the special use permit is incredibly important, but also the development of a land ordinance beyond that. I know you all will work out the technical parts of that. But
So Jake, you just took my words right out of my
sorry.
mouth. That's okay, you say it better.
But thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so let's move to staff questions on this, and we'll start with Councilmember Silva.
Well, with that lead in, I was going to say, why would we forego both? Why wouldn't we do both? The special use permit for the first one as a means of getting our feet wet, and maybe, and I do have a question this, and then in parallel, consider the zoning change or the additional land use category. But my questions are involved in, why does it take so long? Sorry, let's just cut to the chase.
Yeah, you mean for the land use, the new land use classification,
No,
or
well, let's start with the special use permit. So how long do we think?
I think the special use permit would be more like 3 months. But because the microhome village also triggers design review, so it would have a design review commission, and then it would go to planning commission for the special use permit, and then I think it would go back for final design review.
So.
But I think the use
Really?
permit itself would be.
Really?
Well, I'm just process-wise, I'm not stating my opinion, but I think that's what the process would be.
Couldn't it qualify for the ADU design guidelines?
It wouldn't because, well, I'll defer to Andrew Smith. I don't think these qualify as ADUs, though.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, Andrew Smith, head of long-range transportation planning. So these are not considered ADUs under the zoning regulations, and so they wouldn't fall under those special provisions. Of course, in terms of amending the zoning ordinance, that there's a great deal of discretion that the city council would have in creating new rules.
Sorry. So on the guidelines end, is there anything preventing us from making the guidelines apply to ADUs and microhomes?
Oh, you mean the design standards for ADUs?
Yeah.
They could certainly be used, as part of new regulations for microhomes.
Okay.
And what exactly would design review? I mean, I'm just really concerned that our design review commissioners are used to large projects of significant scope. These are like they're the size of backyard sheds and pool structures. And how do you get this from becoming a multi-meeting process, I'm looking at the new community development director, where what they're really, I mean, it seems like the design of the roof materials, the roof color, the paint color, and whatever the exterior siding is, there's a limited number of choices in here. What are they weighing in on?
Review would occur, design review is required for pretty much any new construction, any buildings. There's some exceptions for single-family dwellings. So just process-wise, it's just we're following the zoning ordinance. In terms of what the Design Review Commission is looking at, there are design criteria, design standards that are in the zoning ordinance, as well as citywide design guidelines. Of course, those guidelines are not written specifically to this particular product type. Speaking to the issue of, typically looking at site layout, architecture, they are looking at landscaping, things of that nature. And that's just speaking generally to any project, whether it be this or something else.
Well, I understand that, but then I'm also thinking about the scope and scale of this. And we're not going to have a 20-foot setback at the front, because where's the front? I mean, there's just a lot of standards that don't seem to be there for them to rely on to say whether they're meeting the standards. I'm kicking a dead horse here.
Council member, if I could, if the way that the code and requirements are now established for the Design Review Commission, unless there was a zoning ordinance amendment and a change to that, the Design Review Commission has the ability to waive their own design review. So in this case, I think there's two different subjects. One, how do they process now through a special use permit? And in that process, we, the staff, and the applicant could request the Design Review Commission to waive for the very reasons you stated. It's a relatively limited scope. It's not a large project. They're small. They're in an already disturbed space. So we could do that through the now process. And then in a process where the council could direct us to amend the code, either in the special use permit requirements or the zoning code, we could establish the new criteria that would allow a streamlined review process.
Okay. What would to do a new land use category, do we have to apply it to every location for faith-based land, or can we pick the sites and somehow, it must be within a mile of a BART station or something like that, so that we consolidate where we're going with a land use update?
Yes, the City Council retains a great deal of discretion in establishing standards, whether they be locational, geographic standards, design standards, land use standards, anything. It's not a fits all where you create a new land use classification and it's just automatically allowed everywhere in the city or everywhere in one particular zone. The ordinance can be very narrowly worded if that's the desire of the council.
And then if we were to adopt a new land use category, which is an overlay essentially to existing zoning, is that how this would work?
It could be, or we could establish a specific defined area and specific zones. So there's a couple of options.
But in either case, the property owner doesn't have to take advantage of it. It doesn't make it an automatic. It just means they have an opportunity that is afforded to them.
Correct. Just like in our downtown pedestrian retail district, restaurants are an allowed use, as are retail uses, and the landlord can choose what they want to tenant the building with.
All right.
All right, let's move the other, let me first ask the other housing committee. We'll come to you, Councilmember. So, Councilmember Darling, do you have any further questions?
I think I'm getting my questions answered.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Now, Councilmember Haskew.
Okay, so as I remember, we have a fast track process for housing that's affordable. At least we used to for a while. Does anybody remember that? And
Are you referring to like SB 35 streamlining for affordable housing, or?
whatever we had, affordable housing could move up in the queue and get faster attention than.
Well, we certainly have, internally, we do have like an internal sort of policy approach that we will move affordable housing up in line as it comes in, but outside of that, there are other processes that will streamline or expedite or allow by right certain types of affordable housing. I don't think that would apply to these particular types of projects, at least not the way it's currently, not if we were processing it through like a special use permit. Those apply, like under SB 35, it has to already kind of be zoned for that, and it has to meet other criteria to qualify for the streamlining, and that wouldn't happen in the case of these types of developments. But certainly internally, we can create internal processes that shorten certain time frames, but we can't necessarily bypass the planning commission or design review processes that are required by code.
You talked in your report about the RENA allocations and that we would get credit for the RENA allocations if we had the full zoning change. Did I get that right?
No, so we would get credit for when the units are actually permitted, we would get credit for them. They would count towards our RENA, but we wouldn't necessarily get credit in the land use capacity unless we were able to demonstrate a likelihood that they would be developed. And currently, because we don't, a lot of the faith-based properties have all different kinds of underlying zoning, they wouldn't necessarily qualify unless we either had an application or a property owner had specifically stated an intent to develop this on their property. We could possibly count that in the land use capacity. I can't say for sure one way or another, but because of the underlying zoning, I would say we probably couldn't count them.
So can I clarify there? So I think what you just said is we couldn't put it in our housing element as a prediction unless we had it as zoning. But we do get to count them as they're built.
I don't think I can say 100% because we haven't gotten confirmation from HCD, but because these are permanent structures and they are permanent residential housing, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't count.
Okay.
I can't see a reason why they would be excluded. In fact, they would count for the affordable categories as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the end of my questions.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Just one on parking, maybe two.
Okay.
Can you explain the parking rules that apply to the micro homes themselves, and then the rules that apply to the lost parking spaces that the micro homes are occupying?
Right. So, parking standards would probably be something that would be established either through the special use permit or established if you created the land use classification and created additional standards. But under AB 1851, I believe it was that we were discussing, it does have special provisions for any type of housing development on faith-based property, on church property, where they wouldn't have to replace any lost parking that resulted from the development of the project if the development of the project didn't result in more than 50% elimination of the parking. And that same legislation also permits the city to require one parking spot per unit when housing developments are built on church property. And that would also not necessarily require replacement parking unless it pushed into excess of 50% is my take. And I'm going to actually defer to Assistant City Attorney Brian Hickey, who may have additional things to say.
I think you said it correctly. So basically, if it's religious affiliated property, up to half of the parking that's on the site prior to development can be eliminated in connection with the development. The city retains the right under all circumstances, if it chooses to have a parking standard that is one per unit.
Okay. And then this is not directed to you, but I noticed that we hadn't heard from anyone from Grace Presbyterian, and I just wanted to give them the opportunity to say something to us if they would like to.
I believe Reverend Mark is on Zoom, possibly still. He can be brought in.
You're on mute, Reverend.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Mark Burnham. I'm the pastor at Grace Presbyterian, and we're very excited about the possibilities of this project. You've heard all the details from Jake and Donna and Deanne, and it's been wonderful working with them. We still have some processes to go through for our congregation approval and getting the word out to them about some more of the details, but otherwise, I'd say it's something we're excited about, a way that we can participate in the community, use some of the resources, the land and the parking area there to help those in our community. So we are very excited about it.
We have one question from Councilmember Silva.
Reverend, as I recall, Grace Presbyterian has had a co-op preschool for many years. Are you still sponsoring the co-op preschool, and do you have any concerns if you do?
Yes, that's very much part of the life of the church, and that's continuing and going strong. And they are part of this conversation. So no concerns. As we said, and I think as we've heard, the folks who will be our neighbors if this all goes through clearly go through a very intense vetting process. And I think Jake mentioned that they have a similar situation at their church with a background check. So we're looking forward to having them as part of the neighborhood.
All right, I think that's the council member questions for now. Let's take a 5-minute break before we go to public comments and then our final comments after that. So it is 5 minutes enough? We're ready? Okay, 5 minutes. We'll be back here
Is that
then.
enough to see the video that you're?
Oh, well, I'm not sure. We can show the Come Downtown video for our members at home. All right, and we're back after the break. So what we'll do now for public comment is we'll go to first anybody that has public comment here that would like to make a comment. Otherwise, we will be going to Zoom. And so we'll hold off one sec. I'll read the Zoom and then we'll be ready to go for you. There's a lot to now read. Okay, so we will, if there's any member of the public that is on Zoom that would like to provide public comments at this time, please use the raised hand feature or press star 9 if connected by audio only if you would like to provide public comment. For those who desire to provide public comment on this consideration item, please raise your hand now. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been and will during this item be posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record but will not be separately read into the record. Also, please note that during public hearings and consideration items, group spokespersons are allotted 10 minutes in lieu of other members of the group speaking on the item. So we trust that everyone will follow the rules. And at this time, we will start with people that are here, and then we'll move to Zoom after. So if you could please state your name and city of residence for the record.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sam Levine, and I live in Walnut Creek, and I'm a homeowner that lives across the street from the proposed low-income micro houses that are being considered near Rossmore. My neighbors and I have serious concerns about this proposal. Our new neighborhood of 50 townhomes are full of young families, young children right across the street. I think there's about 20 children under the age of 5. And this is not a rich neighborhood, it's a middle-class neighborhood, middle-class families. We all paid way too much for our homes because that's how it is in the Bay Area. And so far, we haven't heard anything about what this plan will do to the value of the homes in the vicinity. Furthermore, I know we have lots of questions about who will be moving into these low-income housing. We heard about the vetting process. We saw some of the people. I wouldn't have a problem living next to Jamal. Anybody like Jamal, anybody that we saw on the screen, they all seem terrific. But I work in San Francisco, and I see what has happened to that beautiful city. There's open drug use and selling, used needles on the ground, trash and feces on the street. Petty theft, car break-ins are the highest in the country. And most of these homeless people in San Francisco are mentally ill and drug addicts. That's clear to anybody who sees what's going on. The problem won't be solved by putting a roof over their heads. A lot of these people need to be hospitalized. So again, we're very concerned about the vetting process. And we're very concerned about it starts at 6, then what, does it move to 8? Does it move to 10? Again, a lot of us just moved into this new community right across the street. It's a 3-year-old housing development, middle-class families. None of us could afford to see our houses plummet in prices. We saw the video up there of how nice Walnut Creek is during the break, and obviously we want to keep it that way. So I hope you guys will consider our thoughts.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Akov, and I also live in Walnut Creek. We've been talking about our soon-to-be neighbors, but nobody's actually talking about the current neighborhood that there is over there, right next to Rossmore. So I moved from San Francisco because I didn't want to start a family in the city. I didn't want to because I had to skip over needles and human feces on my way to or from work, or just taking the dog out to a casual walk. My community, the Trellis community, is located right next to Rossmore. It's across the street from the across the street from the no-income elderly facility that is right next to the proposed parking lot. We also have a mental health facility that is also right next to that parking lot structure. Allowing these micro homes in our church's parking lot will cause a lot of damage to our community. We already have wandering homeless folks breaking into our backyards, stealing stuff off of our porches, and causing mayhem. We have little children in our neighborhood, a small playground we built for them, and the last thing we want to see is some junkie shooting up or using the bathroom out on the open street across from us. both things that I have witnessed myself several times in San Francisco. My wife and I and other families are middle-class folks who got into a lot of debt to be able to afford a house in Walnut Creek. These houses cost us a lot of money, and we pay a lot in property taxes cents. Allowing this horrible plan will decrease the value of our homes and will make it unbearable for us and our children. The plan in front of you is misleading and full of deceit. There will be financial impact as a result of this plan. Our homes will plummet in their value. And there is alternative action that was not considered. We have other facilities and other industrial areas where these micro houses could be installed. We're not laughing, nor we're pleased with this plan. There's zero disregard to our community, and we only found out about this whole plan today when a news person came to ask us about our opinion about the matter. That is not okay. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Deepak Atreya. I'm also a homeowner at Trillis community. And before I begin, right, Reverend, great presentation, right? I appreciate the comments, appreciate the initiative, and I'm not against the idea per se, right? What the issue that I have is this specific location that we have.
Microphone, please.
Sorry, the issue that I have is the specific location that we have chosen in this particular case, right? What we have, like my neighbors here alluded, we have a senior high-risk population right there in Rossmore, right? A lot of seniors, a senior facility right next door to the parking lot, if you will, right? And a preschool attached to the church, and at least 20 small little kids and the children right across the street. And right across the street, we also have a community park where all throughout the summer, right, we have like kids having their summer camps, right? And I did, great presentation again, and I did hear the word vetting to the extent possible during the presentation, right? With the current population that we have there, vetting to the extent possible is not an option, right? And, with all the conditions that we can imply, right? Like my neighbors alluded, just 3 weeks ago, we had an incident right there, right? Thankfully, nobody was hurt, nothing, untold happened, but somebody did steal something somebody yard and started camping outside. But that obviously, raises concerns with small little kids. Me, myself, I have a 11-month-old, right? So I hope that you guys consider some of the aspects, right? I'm not against the solution. I'm against the specific location chosen, given the high-risk population in that community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Chrisanne Giles, and I'm with Homemade Northern California. I want to encourage the city to take a look at zoning changes or a zoning overlay, so you could allow this in multiple locations throughout the city. It's part of an important solution to our problem with people that are unhoused. And then I wanted to just touch on a nuance on the financing. If public money is used, we're not able to donate labor from the building community. We're able to donate materials, and we're able to donate forward planning, but you have to divide those two pockets. So it is just a slight nuance on what we're able to bring to the table. But the builders are incredibly generous, and we're looking forward to doing some projects in Walnut Creek. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Councilman. Al Martinez here, live in Walnut Creek and also a resident. So my concern is with the proposal. I think Councilmember Silva actually touched on this, where there's other forms of requirements in terms of land uses, and I think the faith-based business model that's been proposed today is one that's great, but also one that has a lot of issues, because a lot of those faith-based organization properties are in residential communities that house a multitude of different types of Walnut Creek residents. So I think a rebuttal to that would be to really think about different avenues of land uses outside of the faith-based organization to consider this great proposal, because I think it's a really long-term problem. But I think what's being proposed today is a very short-term, nearsighted approach to solving that problem. I know you guys have a lot of pressure in terms of getting quota in trying to house a lot of the unhousable currently today across not just Contra Costa, but all over the Bay Area in general. but I definitely would consider a little bit more due diligence on the proposal, not just with faith-based organization properties, but other properties within the Walnut Creek District as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to Zoom. If there's anybody that is in line or raise their hand to speak.
First speaker is Pete Bennett.
Hi there. You know, you're heading in the right direction. Not particularly everything you've done has helped me. In fact, I haven't received any help at all. But this message is to the folks that just spoke. You have some interesting comments about the homeless people. If you look up 417 Park Avenue, 12C, New York, New York, you'll find out it's a penthouse. If you look up the address of David Rockefeller, I think it's on 88th. I used to go there for brunch. I lived in an apartment that sold for $14 million, connected to a trust that the Walnut Creek Police refused to investigate because they were represented by the attorney that crafted my mother's trust. That only cost me $1 million, just $1 million. Okay, only $1 million I lost because they wouldn't do their job. And I used to go to brunch with David Rockefeller, one of the richest men in the world, and my grandfather represented him. And then I find out friends of Rudy Giuliani are living in that apartment with our family furniture. And then last year I hired an attorney and they shot him dead. And I've been arrested in Walnut Creek 20 times. And the town council, when they would have their meetings here, would walk right by me sleeping outside. Nothing. You, Kevin, that's particularly perturbed with that. Right behind your wall, that's where I slept for 3 months until somebody stole what I had left. And how did that affect me? Well, they got my Social Security card, which made it hard to solve my EDD, and now I'm out $13,000. And guess what, everybody? I'm homeless, and I lived in a penthouse. How about you? Park Avenue, anybody?
Next speaker is David E.
Hello, my name is Moran, and I live across the street from the location where this proposal is set to be taking place, the microhousing units. And I wanted to share my personal perspective on how I think that this is actually quite concerning. While I do think that this is a problem that does need to be solved, I think that, or I strongly urge the City Council here to be thinking about what is the most appropriate location for something like this. We live right across the street on the sidewalk that is close to the parking lot. And if any of you have been to this location, you'll see that there's a very dense community of houses, with many families with young children who play in the playground right across the street, who walk along the sidewalk, ride their bikes, go to the park next to our community. And this is definitely going to heavily change the dynamics and the experience that we all families have living in this community. And I think my main request is not to ignore this problem. I think this is a problem that does need to be solved, but I do want to highly urge you to think about what this is going to do in our community, in our location, and also for any of our neighboring, the neighbors nearby. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Dan McGrath.
Thank you, everybody, for
taking this subject up. My name is Stan McGrath, and I'm living in Rossmore with my wife. And I only want to make 2 points. First of all, I think this is a very important project, and I feel very supportive of it. I can't speak for everybody at Rossmore, but I know many people who live in Rossmore are very supportive of this initiative. We're talking about 6 units, perhaps as small as 6 people. I think the notion that the Rossmore community is fearful of this development is perhaps a little bit far-fetched. So I simply want to say thank you for taking this initiative on. There are many of us in Rossmore that are very supportive of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
He lives in a gated community. He lives in a gated
Okay.
community.
First of all, can I ask you to please put your mask on? It's a requirement to be here tonight. Thank you. Okay, next speaker.
Next speaker is Jan Warren.
Good evening. It does take a bit to get into these meetings. Boy, I am excited about this project. I mean, I'm a resident. Jan Warren, lived here 36 years, been working on housing and lack of housing and lack of affordable housing for 10 years. I am familiar with the Wonderful Hope Solutions and the good work they're doing. I am familiar with Grace Presbyterian. I know that every project that we've tried to do in this city, people have the same concerns that I've heard tonight from the residents. I would invite any of them to join our Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force and come to know the more of the real people, the people from our community that live in our community that are being pushed out. One of the fastest growing populations are seniors, and I'm a senior. So you'll find out when you get older, what that's all about. But the value of our homes have never gone down, never, regardless of what. These are nice homes, and you would, if you were to drive down, you wouldn't even know the people were living there. Everyone deserves to have a safe place to live. It's a human right. It's a moral thing that we need to do, and to do it as fast as we can do this and to multiply it will make, Anyway, I support the double approaches that was mentioned by Cindy Silva and several others. I can hardly talk tonight. I really am excited about this, and give us some time. The residents would come to more meetings and ask more questions and learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
And the next speaker is Moran.
David Eliyahu. Oh, hello, my name is David Eliyahu, and I just wanted to be add a point of clarification regarding the gentleman from Rossmore, that Rossmore is actually a gated community, which is not adjacent from this property. It's like a bit down the street, and many of us residents who are expressing concerns do not live in that gated community that's a few blocks away, but rather actually directly across the street. There's about 20 to 30 young families there. So I just wanted to add that point of clarification.
Thank you.
Mayor, I don't see any additional hands raised.
Okay, we'll close the public comment at this time and bring it back to council.
Mayor, could I ask, perhaps, usually when we're doing these types of things, the applicant or the proponent has an opportunity to respond to the public comment. Were you going to
I was going to do that.
Okay,
now.
thank you.
So I was going to ask if, if staff, or in this instance, the applicant as well, would like to respond to any of the comments that you've heard and address some of the issues of concern by the residents. Why don't you both come up?
Thank you. Hi, Margot Ernst, Housing Manager for the city. You know, I will second what the resident Jan Warren said, is invite folks to feel free to come out to the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force. This is a group that's been together since 2012, working to address issues of homelessness in the community. And you know, the group is very welcoming. We have a lot of difficult conversations, so you'd be certainly welcome to come express your views and maybe be able to get involved and come up with solutions that might feel more comfortable. But also, I think it would be a good opportunity to really know what's going on in the community. So I will second that. I also think, you know, I do.
Excuse me, please. Let's keep civil and decorum right now so that we can respond.
Yeah. So, so that's just an invitation for that. And then I also, you know, we're working hard as a community to address homelessness. It's been, you know, there were a couple-year period a few years back where it was a priority for council. And as you recall, we had similar difficult conversations here when we started the shelter at the Walnut Creek Armory. And we have had a lot of success, and minds and hearts have changed for residents in the community when they see how the programs work, how the success is, and that they haven't impacted property values. So I think that is something that time will tell. You know, time and experience with this, and I also think, you know, we're not in the same situation. We don't have the same circumstances that San Francisco has. So I understand a lot of the residents who've moved here from other communities who have faced really much more difficult circumstances in addressing homelessness. I think the circumstances are different here. So, you know, I just want to caution drawing specific parallels without kind of looking at the underlying factors. And you know, one of the things that's exciting about this project with these micro homes is that they are actually providing housing. So they're moving people who are unhoused from the street into a safe housed environment, which will actually reduce some of the issues that we face with homelessness in the community. And Pastor Jake? Yeah.
I think comments made by folks on Zoom and here in the building are valid concerns. I think that we faced them all as well when we were at the First Presbyterian Church of Hayward site, mostly from the preschool parents. The preschool is less than 30 yards away from our 6 micro homes. And to date, I think we have multiple families who are actively engaged with the residents of the micro homes. I think there's concerns if you are, like I said earlier, taking a straight off the streets from an encampment, and then putting them in the micro homes. But that's just not the population that we're working with. Like, they're two very different things. This is Jamal and it's Patricia, and Patricia watches my kids at church. Betty and JoJo. It's a mom and a daughter who will probably access, if it's a public playground, I don't know the answer to that. We'll probably use the playground with other families. They're working. So I think the concerns are real, but I do think that with some time and the vetting process does work itself out. And like I said before, we didn't have any, we've been at it for 12 months with 0 calls for service and 0 issues with parents. Our neighborhood complaints have become that there's not enough parking for Trader Joe's. But there's been 0 complaints about the residents. In fact, there in this process, there is at this point, but a year from now, when we did our CUP, there was multiple people who, we had a CUP automatic review to make sure that it was going well. Everybody was all for it. So I think, I don't doubt the concerns of young families who have moved into a neighborhood. I just advocate for give it some time to really meet the residents, potentially, I can't speak for Deanne, but have some local people serve on the vetting process, get to know folks. There's ways to help work that through.
I have a couple questions, actually.
Me or?
For you, yeah. And thank you for some of that explanation. So what happens, well, first of all, let me ask, how long is the lease or whatever it's called?
It'll really be up to Deanne and Hope. They're the operator. I can only speak for what we do. The lease for us is 18 months.
Okay.
That's the length of program. We are transitional at First Pres. So we're working hard with an 18-month with a 3-month, like extension if necessary, right? Because we're really close with people. It is a lease. You can get evicted. We met on the front side with the RHA and how the Rental Housing Authority really working with us, Rental Housing Association, really working with us. Their kind of word of wisdom to us was, you can avoid 95% of evictions by doing good work on the application side. And so that's what we continually do.
So you do, if somebody broke the rules, and obviously, there was a real issue there, they can be evicted.
Yes, like any other landlord-tenant process, it's long and it has its rules to it and it's legal and, but yes, you'd have to go through that process.
Okay. Council, have any other questions at this time?
Can I respond also?
Is that that's the applicant?
That's Donna, yeah.
That's, yeah, Donna, you can.
Okay, great. I've had my hand up a while. So I just want to respond to some of the comments that I am working as a volunteer for Grace Presbyterian to help them work with, right now we're working on setting up some dates to hold community sessions where people can come and learn more about what we're talking about. And we don't have any dates yet, but they probably will be during worship services at that time because that's when the majority of people will be present. And so the neighbors will be invited, and there'll just be a series of listening and talking about potential solutions to any perceived concerns. And so I'd like to ask the community to give it a chance. The newspapers are wonderful. They got out ahead of us on this. It was not on purpose that we hid it from anybody. It was that we didn't exactly know enough to share with our neighbors yet. The designs are still being put together. The processes are still being put together. And to have the community come and then we can't answer questions wouldn't be good either. So I'd like to ask for patience. The neighbors will be invited, local groups will be invited, and absolutely the operator, Hope Solutions, will be able to be present and answer questions. So just give us a little bit of time to get back out to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a Mayor Pro Tem?
I had a question for Margot, or maybe Andy too. So some of the commenters tonight, and I can understand the confusion and the concern, I think have the impression that we're approving a project tonight, and that is not what's happening. We're talking about a process. And so maybe if you could explain, and I know it's complicated for people that don't come to these meetings all the time and understand how the process, but we're talking about a process now, and that if the process went forward, it would involve more noticed public hearings that all the residents would get notice of and be able to come down and express their concerns about a particular project.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad that you asked that question because in hindsight, after I sat down, I wished I had made that point, which is to say that we are very early in the process. So, Grace Presbyterian has stepped forward and expressed interest, but they haven't actually submitted a development application. So we haven't triggered any of the actual public review process for a site-specific project. What was asked by the HCD committee was to come and have a presentation on the concept. So this is very exploratory. This is seeking your input and your feedback, as well as input and feedback from the community, and there's no decision tonight or even a decision in the very near term about this. So, you know, depending on how we process this moving forward, if Grace Presbyterian chooses to move forward and submit an application, there would be opportunities for public comment. There would, you know, if it goes through the special use permit, as I noted, the Planning Commission would have the authority to you know, adopt conditions that would be designed and intended to protect, you know, to protect the welfare of the neighboring community. So those considerations would certainly be considered by Planning Commission. And then in addition, as I noted, if there's going to be a broader land use change that would apply to multiple zoning districts or other properties in the city, that would also be an extensive public review process, and one that the city would really, city staff, I should say, you know, we really take seriously the public input process. So that would be a very engaged process to make sure that the community is notified of what's being proposed and what that would look like.
Okay, thank you.
And Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you. And I think that's an excellent point of clarification. This is not about a specific project right now, but the process itself. Councilmember Silva, any further questions or?
I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Okay. So I think at this point, we'll bring it back to council for comments. And let me also ask, you're looking for 2 areas here that we are responding to?
Yeah, so basically just we're seeking your feedback and input, and then also direction. What we've proposed or what staff has kind of come up with are 2 options. So one is, you know, processing we could talk about it in terms of Grace, but it's really just about processing a site-specific application through the special use permit, and then also the separate option for doing a new land use classification. But then there's another, because this is a discussion item, it's a consideration item. Certainly, you can weigh in on any other parts of the parameters if you wanted to talk about using non-faith-based properties, if you wanted to talk about using housing this micro home villages that are not specific for unhoused population, but for other parts of the population. All of that would be any kind of welcome feedback or input that you would have.
Great. Thanks, Margot. All right. Who would like to start?
I like the land use attorney.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois, you've been selected.
Well, you know, what we're being asked tonight to do is to provide input and direction to staff on the micro home village concept as a tool, generally, not as to a specific site. And I know we got very specific tonight, and I understand the concerns of the neighbors. I'm glad that they came out, and we're here tonight, and we're on the phone. And I also appreciate the comments we heard from the pastor and from the service provider. I think that provided some comfort to me, and from the Building Industry Association as well. But in terms of being conceptual, I think micro homes are an important tool in the toolkit to address affordable housing and issues in the community. And I think it's one that we definitely in Walnut Creek need to explore and find appropriate sites for. I do think churches in general and surplus land is an area where micro homes conceptually make sense. But I think what this conversation has underscored to me is that I'm not for the 2 approach, that we allow the use by right. I think it's very important, and that we have the community engaged in this conversation, along with the development community and the faith-based community. And so in my mind, changing the zoning to allow the use by right is a non-starter for me. It has to be a special use permit, which would be a noticed public hearing before the Planning Commission, where residents within 300, 500 feet. First, there's the start of the process is a development application gets submitted. Hopefully way before that happens, as Ms. Colombo spoke, there would be some outreach. I would have wished some outreach would have happened before even this consideration item tonight, but we are where we are. So some outreach happens and a development application gets submitted, and it goes through our city process of being vetted by our staff and gets set eventually for a notice public hearing before the Planning Commission, where the planning commission has discretion over that permit to say yes, no, or yes with conditions. I think that's the right approach for this particular use. And I also think, you know, I had asked Margot earlier, you know, are there any other churches that have expressed interest? And it doesn't appear there have been so far. And so I think amending the zoning to deal with what might be a one or two property owner issue really doesn't make sense to me. What does make sense to me, though, is to, saying that, I think the flip side is, I don't think the design, it should be a two-hearing process. I think the design review should be done at a staff level for these types of projects. And so I'd be open to looking at amendments to the code. And again, we're not doing that tonight. That's a whole nother public hearing process before we could even take that formal action. But looking at kind of design review being done at a staff level, not being eliminated altogether, but just eliminating a second public hearing. So that's where I'm at tonight on this and the direction that I would give to staff.
Thank you, Matt. Let's move over to Councilmember Darling.
Thank you, and thank you for everybody that came out tonight. This is one of those huge challenges that we as a community face, and we've tried to do our best to find ways to make it work for as many people as possible. Right now, my concern is that if we go and try to do a by right, that by trying to go fast, we'll actually end up going slow, because it will be harder to convince, to hear people's concerns on individual projects. So I think right now, I'm at a point where I want to see a special use permit for a project with a very efficient review so that people have an opportunity, but we don't have to go through 2 or 3 design review committee meetings. And I agree this is an important tool in the toolbox. You know, you look at the costs, over $700,000 for a studio apartment at 699 YVR. We cannot afford to handle our residents that are struggling with that kind of a cost. So I agree it's a tool in the toolbox. And I just also wanted to pass on some experience that we've had with this issue. You know, we've had a winter shelter here in Walnut Creek for the last several years. And when it first came to this decision-making body and to the Planning Commission where I was at the time, people were very upset about it. They were very concerned about the impact it would have on their community. It was right in a residential neighborhood at the Armory. And yet, year after year, when the hardworking people that are trying to solve homelessness in Walnut Creek would go through and run the shelter, we'd have them come back at the end of the night or the end of the year and report out on what they had found. And they would go walk through, well, we had 50 people using it. We helped 19 people get find a place to live. We had a couple people that we got them reconnected with their family. We got people into rehab. It ended up being something that really worked. And I don't know if earlier tonight on our consent agenda was an agenda item where we said we had required that they meet with the neighbors on a regular basis. And that neighborhood meeting, nobody goes to it anymore because nobody thinks it's a problem. And so tonight we ended up saying it's just going to be folded into the regular homeless task force because they had done a great job of taking care of what the neighbors' concerns were. I'm a parent. My son's Boy Scout troop met at St. Paul's. He's graduated and gone off to God only knows what. But they met at the same church that hosted the Trinity Center. And we were always watching that interaction, making sure that our kids were safe. And because the Trinity Center is there's some screening that goes on there, but there's a lot of people there we were there. I was with the troop for about 6 years before he graduated and left for college. And our boys built stuff for the Trinity Center. There was never a problem with our boys interacting with the Trinity Center. So it's something that I'm hopeful that we can work with this project and find a way to make it something where, you know, a few years from now, we'll say, okay, we don't need to have the regular meeting with the neighbors because the concerns are taken care of. But I understand what your concerns are, and so that's why I want to see kind of a mixed approach here, you know, still do a special use permit for these things, so you have a chance to say what you believe and to listen to people and see if we could find a way to make this work.
Thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Haskew.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that I think we need to remember. Homeless doesn't mean the worst case scenario. Even the Reverend addressed the fact that some people choose homeless living, and there is no apparent good way to give them help and
You're
make
off.
them. Now I've got to
Want to start again?
No, because I don't remember. So I think I can come close, which is homelessness is a broad range of situations. There are people who for life circumstances have had a medical emergency and used up all their funds. They don't have any insurance. Their children have leukemia, and the next thing they know, they can't afford their houses. They were good people. They are good people. They're the same as you and me, except something terrible happened in their lives. It's amazing. I'm a CPA by profession, and it is amazing how many people are this close to homelessness, but for the fact that they managed to eke out the day with a positive paycheck. It is one of the things that we're grappling with COVID, because we anticipate unhoused people are going to be more common than ever. So when you say the word homeless, everybody goes to the worst case scenario. The people who are so far gone that, as I was trying to say, almost can't be saved. And so this isn't going to be the case for these people. This is going to be more likely the case of the person who, for whatever reason, but for the grace of God, go you and I. Another thing that occurs to me is I know the people. I know Cheryl from a long time ago. We were on the same group of women that met regularly, and she is an amazing person, and she does good work. And the people that are here are absolutely people that care about the whole community, not just one segment of it. So they care about your house. And to support my statement, I believe one of the biggest donors, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Pulte Homes. Who built your development? Pulte Homes. They want your houses to stay in top value. They want your houses to be. No, I live in a Ponderosa development built in 1982. They're still their reputation is absolutely important to them. They want people who buy their houses 10 years, 15 years later to move into good, solid housing. I think that your logic is a little short-sighted.
No,
No, this is.
We have, I'm sorry,
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm not saying you are. And I'm not allowed to, this is a one-way conversation.
We are now having public comment is closed. We have now brought this back to council comments.
I am now going to say that I agree with both of the two council members who spoke before, who have said that we probably should do this at least until we really, really, truly see this on a one-time basis with a special use permit. And that we learn from what we have heard, and we are well concerned about your, as you were talking, I was sitting here thinking, supposing it happened across the street from my house, how would I feel? I have so much faith in the people that are doing this that I think I would feel confident that it would be something that I would be proud to have. So one time, and then we'll make a decision, maybe if it really works and it really does good going forward.
Thank you, Luella. Councilmember Silva.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everyone who was here this evening and participating through Zoom, and for the diversity of comments and the experiences. I truly appreciate the partnership between the faith community and the building industry and the interfaith councils and the services coalition and the nonprofits, and also the public agencies that you worked with in Alameda and Hayward and San Leandro, many of whom I know, we know those council members, and they're our colleagues as well. This is a tool that is necessary for the toolbox of solutions to tackle the homeless situation. This tool in particular, though, as my colleagues have said, is not the tool that is going to address the on-street homeless challenges and the ones that you see on the streets in San Francisco that have been described. This is about the community members that, as my colleagues said, have had a catastrophe in their life situation such that they are now unhoused. 3 years ago at Thanksgiving, is it Hilltop Covenant Church? Yes, in the Park and Mead neighborhood, has an annual Thanksgiving for the homeless on a Saturday afternoon, and I was invited to come up and help serve. And I was working next to a woman who was in her work scrubs, and I was talking to her. What did she do? She was a nursing assistant in a convalescent home, nursing home. And then the conversation, I had this full-on conversation with her for 20 to 30 minutes, and I thought she was just like me, a volunteer from the community. And then it turned out she was homeless, that she had had a medical catastrophe the year prior in a car accident. She didn't have enough insurance. She had to send her college-age daughters to make sure they were living appropriately because they didn't know she was homeless, because after a few months of couch surfing, she was living in a tent near Pleasant Hill BART station. But once she got a job, she was working 40 hours a week. And it was, thank goodness, she told me, for the Trinity Center, where she could every morning get a shower before she went to work. And this is the place that would have been for her. She was not shooting up. She was not a drug addict. She was a fully functioning member of our community who had a catastrophic medical problem. And so I think we need to move forward on this. I agree with my colleagues that doing it at this point in time with the special use permit and ensuring that the Planning Commission fully vets the public comments and develops the list of conditions that are required for the project. I am hopeful we can find, I like Mayor Pro Tem's suggestion that staff level design review is more appropriate than what happens in our design review commission with the architects and the landscapers and all of the intense attention to detail that they have. And I am thankful that solutions like this are brought to us by members of the community, and that we have ways to make these solutions work in various neighborhoods.
Thank you, Cindy. And I think my colleagues have put this well. First of all, we're in a housing crisis. So we know that the demand is far outstripping the supply, and that really puts people that are homeless in an impossible situation to get into something to give them four walls and a ceiling. My brother was homeless. I grew up in Walnut Creek in Lafayette. My parents have a nice house. They still have a nice house near John Muir. I had a house. My brother had some hard times and ended up homeless. And when he was able to get onto his feet through a halfway house, he lived in an apartment and had a job. And for the rest of his life, unfortunately died a few years ago, but for the rest of his life, he had a break that helped him get a place to live. He was not shooting up. He was somebody you actually wouldn't have known was homeless. In fact, there was a TV report a few years ago that somebody was going to school and was like a straight A student. And it turned out they were living in a car with their mother. And nobody knew that this person was homeless, which is the homeless, right? It's not just somebody living on a sidewalk behind a building somewhere. People that are living in a car, people that you wouldn't know. A few years ago, an anchorman on a TV station said that they had been homeless at one point and were still doing their TV reports. So homeless has this whole range. Housing values are not going to plummet. Walnut Creek, the Walnut Creek housing, I mean, is beneficial for the people that live here. It just continues to go up and up and up. And by the way, to make this a little bit more personal on the Trellis community, I wasn't on city council yet, but I was here for those meetings. And the surrounding neighborhoods were afraid that the density of housing for this proposed Pulte development would lower their housing values and bring in undesirable populations. And the council at that time disagreed. And they said, we think this is good for the community. This will be a different style of home. This will be for middle class or potentially lower middle class that can't afford to live in Walnut Creek right now. And these are the people that are your neighbors. I do agree that the special use permit, that this should be one time, that we need to be able to ensure that the community has an opportunity to weigh in on every time this is proposed, because they've moved into areas that didn't have this as a zoning. So I think it's important to have that special use permit. And I actually agree. I hadn't really thought of this. I appreciate the Mayor Pro Tem bringing this up, that staff can be the design review on this, because that would help streamline that, because these aren't whole landscaped areas. So I don't think we're voting on anything tonight, but that's the direction that you have from council.
Yeah, I guess the one issue I would want to clarify is with respect to staff design review. As the code reads right now, that purview is with the design review commission. So the design review commission can decide to delegate certain projects to the planning manager. Outside of that, switching to or sort of mandating staff design review could also come from the city council. So I just want to clarify that one point.
Short version is we can have the necessary discussions about design review.
Thank you. And again, this was not specifically project discussed. I mean, even though that was used as an example, this is the beginning of a process, and you are certainly, the community is certainly able to be part of this process as it moves forward in discussions. All right. Okay, we're going to adjourn tonight's meeting in the memory of Walnut Creek resident Richard Rainey. Dick, as so many people knew him, was a former Contra Costa County Sheriff, Assembly member, state senator. He passed away peacefully on July 4th. He was a great and honorable friend of Walnut Creek and a personal friend of mine, and I think everybody on this council dais. His importance to the community simply cannot be understated. And Councilmember Luella Haskew, who has known Dick Rainey for over 30 years, and his family, will pay tribute to him on behalf of us all.
Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me, thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for letting me break tradition and do this. As you said, Sheriff Rainey, and I know him as Sheriff Rainey, has been an invaluable member of our community. He was born in Medford, Oregon, and he spent his early years traveling with his parents to lumber camps. It was during this time that Dick realized that he wanted more for himself, and after high school, he joined the U.S. Navy, where he served for 4 years. After his tour with the Navy, he began his career in law enforcement, first with the Compton Police Department and later with the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department, working his way up from just a sheriff member to a captain, and ultimately he ran for election and was a sheriff for our county for many, many years. Unfortunately, while that happened, while he was sheriff, his first wife died. But fortunately for me, because this is how I got to know him, he met his wife, Sue, during a chance encounter at a 4th of July event. Dick had 3 children, Sue had 4, and yet they got married and they became one family. I spent some Christmases with their family, and it was a really together family. Dick and Sue spent many years together raising their children. They played tennis. They enjoyed trips to their timeshare in Mexico. But it was also during this time that Dick attained political success, first as an assembly member and then as a state senator. And to show you my adoration for the man, I was his volunteer treasurer when he ran for Senate. And I processed, with the help of my husband, over a couple of $1 million for the cost of that campaign. I don't know that I would make that decision again. According to many, Dick navigated his impressive career with a sincere and quiet reserve. He is admired by people who worked with him from both sides of the aisle for his dignity, his intelligence, his care, and his high standard of ethics. Ultimately, even so, he served as a regional director for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under the George W. Bush administration. Under the retirement, Richard enjoyed golf and spending time with his, count 'em, 12 grandchildren. This evening, we mourn the loss of an important member of our community and extend our deepest condolences to Sue Rainey, who was one of us. She was the mayor and a council member of Walnut Creek for several terms, their children and their grandchildren. If you're available, there will be a celebration of life tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Lesher Center, and it is open to people who are coming to help the family adjust to life without Dick, me included.
Thank you.
Adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And with that, we're adjourned.